All right. What up, perps? Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. We got a little hearing to listen to today. We'll see how this this goes. Hopefully my connection will run a little smoother this morning. I've actually got a hard line run. So we'll see. We'll see how this thing holds up. Judging by how slow it's working right now, it may not be all that great. But we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes. Dang old Matt, what's up, my brother? Yeah, you're right. This should be a good laugh. There's no doubt about that. Trying to get a couple things done for work real fast. So we shall see how this goes this morning. Nothing else. It'll be interesting. It's going to be a fucking clown show. You know how that goes. Where's that? Give me a sec, guys. I'm trying to take care of this for work real quick. It doesn't look. I mean, the hearing's supposed to start here in just a couple minutes. So, yeah, it is. They're always dragging ass. Not like they got anything they have to do. Let me see. All right, it's got that sent over. So we'll see. Warsaw, you should have got one in your email already. Yep, I sent it to you at 9:46. You should have it. So you guys grab your coffee, grab your smokes, if you smoke. Maybe some Tylenol, morphine, Motrin. Let's see how much of a headache this is going to be. And this is another one, even depending on how long it runs, we'll see. But I'm going to try to keep it streaming today. Just because, like I said, I think this one will be pretty interesting. There's another one tomorrow about the weaponization of the federal government. If I can stream that, I'm going to stream that. Then Thursday, I'll try to make sure I send a link out because I'm not going to be able to do it. But Guns and Gadgets, Jared's going to be streaming the oral arguments out of the Fifth Circuit tomorrow. I think Fifth. All right, I got it saved. I'll have to go back in and find it. Yeah, War, you should have a link already, brother. So, hey, while we're waiting for this, I'll show you guys another little interesting read. I can't remember whether I did this one last night or not. Even if I did, we're going to do it again. Mr. Alvin Bragg up here in New York, another criminal that should be in prison. He thinks it's too easy to find or for kids to run into gun content on YouTube and then all of a sudden start building ghost guns. Okay. Which, granted, there probably is still maybe a couple build videos running around, but you guys already know they've cracked down on us so hard when it comes to any kind of building content or gunsmithing content. They've just destroyed channels. But anyway, he's making a connection between YouTube's algorithm, video game content, and then content as far as like building firearms. Vanessa Kitty, what's up, sis? So, and we'll breeze through it real fast. But basically what he's saying is some kid could Google a video for Call of Duty, and then all of a sudden they look for information on maybe one of the guns from Call of Duty, and then all of a sudden they're getting flooded with all these build videos for how to build these ghost guns, which is absolutely asinine. And I have to look. There's a couple people that he's kind of referencing to in this video. One of them's 3D Gunner, which all he does is 3D modeling of firearms. It's really good content for seeing how firearms actually function. I've used them a lot in repairs on firearms. I used them a lot in my gunsmithing classes. Excellent videos. But he's showing the internal workings on a firearm. And apparently Alvin Bragg thinks that's whole 3D modeling, and you can just hit a button and print, and all of a sudden that gun pops off your printer.
Alvin Bragg.
Yep. Good old Alvin Bragg, man.
Yeah, how's it going, man?
It's going, brother. How about you?
Good. And I guess what's happening up on Northern Cousins right now, brother?
What's that?
Here, I'll send you the link. This happened, dude. It's failed once again in the system of a fucking commune, dude. It's just getting worse up there. Let me see if I can let me find it here.
Define that and let me breeze through this real fast. So Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has called on YouTube to address its algorithm, which he claims is steering vulnerable users, particularly young gamers, towards content on making untraceable ghost guns. And of course, this is with the ABC News or one of their affiliates. The investigation led by Bragg's office suggests that YouTube's current algorithm may inadvertently promote videos that instruct viewers on assembling these firearms, potentially increasing the risk of ghost gun creation among minors. Yeah, if that didn't make your head hurt.
Alvin Bragg.
He's a piece of shit, dude. In a recent briefing, Bragg highlighted the ease with which individuals, including teenagers and young adults, can transition from gaming to gun manufacturing videos. This is mind-numbing. It really is.
And you think, it takes like what, minutes to build one of these in a machine shop, but it actually takes hours of actually tuning and processing to make sure it actually functions.
It takes 20 minutes to build this ghost gun. Yeah, fuck you, dude. I'll give you a kit, all the parts, drill press, and everything else. I want a functioning gun in 20 minutes. Get to fucking work. You know, all you need is a computer and a mouse and an internet interest in gaming, and you can go from games to guns in 15 minutes, Bragg explained. This statement was supported by the case where Hughes admitted to learning how to build ghost guns on YouTube in under an hour.
I call bull fucking shit.
Yeah, that's my bullshit meter is fucking pegging out right now. All right. The concern has escalated following incidents such as the arrest of 17-year-old who operated a ghost gun assembly ring from a Harlem daycare. If he was operating a ghost gun assembly ring, he was breaking multiple federal laws. I mean, manufacturing firearms without a license. Where were all the firearms going that he was so-called manufacturing? Yeah, so we already have the laws. It was individuals of that group of youth who were constructing these 3D printed firearms for sale on the street in a daycare center. So we get the gambit. Fuck, I don't know. An NYPD inspector of major case field intelligence, Courtney Nealon. Yeah, come on, man, you guys are killing me. Investigators, including Bonnie Seok, whatever her name is, from the Manhattan DA Ghost Gun Initiative, indicated to WPVI that a simple online search related to the video game Call of Duty could quickly lead users to firearms related content. According to Soak, within minutes of such searches, YouTube suggests videos on the mechanics of various firearms, including 3D printed models. It's not 3D printed models, you jackass. It's 3D modeling showing the internal workings of the firearm, and you have to search for them.
You think that you put this information in and it just builds a fucking thing and it's done and over with? No.
Yeah, that's seriously the way these guys try to make this out to be. So, and this is where this is where some of the crackdowns on gun content that are already here are going to get worse. So, in response, Bragg, alongside with city leaders, has sent a formal letter to YouTube urging the platform to revise its algorithms to avoid directing users, particularly youth, to ghost gun content. The letter also requests enhanced user options to disable suggested violent content and a strict ban on tutorials related to assembling ghost guns. Our videos have been so cracked down. Any sort of build videos, any sort of gunsmithing content, they can do all this, but they can't find child porn on their site. It's amazing to me.
Or stop human trafficking, period.
Yeah. Let's see. Seek noted told WPVI that makes no sense. How after one search for a violent video game, then we see more videos being suggested. How a Glock works, how an AR-15 works, how a revolver works. Those are all the 3D modeling videos that are absolutely great. So all these videos are now being suggested. Just 4 minutes after a search and Call of Duty videos, we have a video then of a 3D printed Glock. That's not the video you have. You have the video of a 3D modeling video of a Glock. Yeah, this is one of those things where basically two things can be true at once. These people are really that ignorant, but they are also seriously trying to play on people's emotions and the ignorance of the people.
Here, I got this for you.
Fluffy, what's up, my brother?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you this email, man. There we go.
Hold on. Apparently, I'm gonna have to refresh something.
I sent it to you.
Let me refresh something because this damn thing's. I said, I'm running a hard line this morning, but I'm still gonna have
We might need Night
to
Strike
get
for this
that
one.
cable company on the phone because they're
You're lagging a bit.
it's freaking, especially with as much money as I pay for internet, it's fucking ridiculous
No kidding.
for this connection to be this slow. Well, it's all right. So apparently my connection is gonna,
Just like last time.
yeah, it's gonna damn. We'll see how if it starts getting too fucking screwy. I'll just have to listen to this in the background or something.
Actually, do you have Night Strike's contact info? See if he can help us out.
Yeah, I've got night stuff, but I don't know.
Just send him a text if you could, just so he can see if he could help us out if you wanted to.
I'd have to bother him just so I can fucking stream.
I don't know. I don't know what's up with your info. I guess I just don't like you sending out the truth.
Definitely ain't liking something, man. I'm gonna have to, like I said, get the good old cable company on the phone and tell her stuff because uh, I pay more than a lot for internet every month to have this shit just be this stupid. We'll see. Maybe it'll hold out. Maybe it'll play nice. Maybe it won't. If it continues to not play nice, then fuck, I don't know. We'll just drop the whole damn thing.
Excuse me. Yeah, see that article I sent you?
Which one? The one about the dude just changing his name?
The one up in Canada. The fucking guy did a. He's got another guy up there. It's never ending. Like it's just they don't understand other policies are gonna do anything, and it never will.
Man, that's why a lot of these laws, whether it's in the United States or whether it's somewhere else, these laws where there's no real victim to it. So you can't have this gun, or you can't have this thing, or you can't have that thing, even though you've never hurt anybody with it. That's why those laws are so ridiculous, because they're absolutely unenforceable. Now, if someone goes out and murders another person, or rapes another person, or robs another person, those are enforceable laws. You know, you have a victim there. You have a crime that's been committed.
You know, back in the old days, we used to hang people for atrocious crimes.
We definitely use a hanging tree these days. That tar and feathers, and I don't know, some common sense here and there. Yeah, Matt, you're right. It should get destroyed. 3D modeling that this guy's doing, I'd have to look up his channel again because I've used him a bunch. You know, that's completely protected speech. And all it is modeling how something works. It's not, you know, a file you can just plug in and hit go on your printer, and then all of a sudden you have this gun. Yeah, speeding's another thing, Fluffy. If I'm doing 95 down the interstate, but I'm not weaving in and out of traffic, running people off the road, I'm not hurting anybody, why the fuck are you worried about my speed? Because you could possibly, you could possibly do something. Well, yeah, I could possibly do a lot of things. I could go to Home Depot and possibly build a whole lot of really dangerous shit, but get back to prosecuting people for crimes they actually commit, not that, oh, they could commit this, so we got to pre-crime their ass. It's kind of one of the reasons this hearing kind of piqued my interest a little bit, because this is talking about, overreach and statutory crimes. So, yeah, I'd like to hear what's going on in this.
The judiciary, as far as Jim Jordan's concerned, this is a prime example of why we need to contact him.
We're definitely, we got that stream coming up. We're definitely going to try to spread the word.
We're not going to spread the word. We're going to contact him en masse.
Well, I'd like to see it happen. Like I said, I hit him up usually on X a couple times a week, telling them we need hearings with these dumbass judges, because it's just ridiculous.
They're not dumbass, dude. They know what they're doing. I mean, hell, look at
they know the games they're playing.
Look at Easterbrook. He's just defying and upset that he wasn't on the Supreme Court.
Oh, man, he is so butthurt he's not on the Supreme Court. It ain't even funny.
No.
And he his opinions and stuff that we've read, stuff that we've looked at, exactly where he's coming from. He's coming from a position of his own feelings. He's not coming from a position of, this is constitutional, this is not. And, these laws have to fit within these constitutional restraints on government. That's not the position he's coming from. He's coming from the position, I don't like these things, therefore I'm going to side with the state at all cost. And to me, that's the judge that should be removed from the court and never allowed to hold office again.
That's kind of like the description of a Benedict Arnold in my book.
He's way beyond that. Blade, what's up, my brother? Because you got to figure the whole time that we're trying to fight these battles with these unconstitutional laws, people are losing their freedom over this. People are losing their livelihoods over
their money.
Yeah, I mean, people are they're flat out being destroyed. And all the while, government's telling us, well, we got to keep these guys. We got to destroy these guys. And it's for everybody's safety, which is absolute horseshit.
It's like during the Red Scare. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting stuff now.
Yeah, Blade. You know how it is. They play all these games because they don't want them. They don't want people to be able to manufacture their own arms. The whole thing about serial numbers is these guys are pushing for a registration on firearms, and if your gun's not numbered, they can't register.
It's already technically your guns are already registered under 4473 form.
Yeah, for the most part, that's except for private sales and being able to build your own gun, and it's not outside of their realm to be able to track down who's building guns, because
the ranking member of the entire committee.
And also, you and I both know, Coop, that serial numbers also don't.
So I'm hearing some audio from them. Apparently, they're going to get started. No,
you know I'm right.
The serial numbers have never stopped a single crime. They've never solved a single violent crime. The most the serial number is going to do is allow you to find a gun if it's been stolen.
Government surveillance will come to order. That objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess.
And that's about it.
Begin today's hearing. with the gentleman from Wisconsin leading us in the
You guys let me know if the audio is good on this. At least they said republic.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on federal statutory and regulatory crimes. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. Here we go. I thank the members who are here this morning. I thank our witnesses who are here, and I thank those in the gallery, both here and on video. Today's hearing is titled Overreach, an examination of federal statutory and regulatory crimes. We could have just as easily called it oversight of Congress, because in many respects, Congress has created the problem that we're here to discuss today. The problem is the number of federal and regulatory
good
crimes
deal, Fluff.
has escalated out of control to the point that law-abiding Americans unknowingly commit several crimes every day.
I mean,
According to one study, the average American commits
during the
3
80s and
felonies
90s,
per
it was
day,
illegal even
which
to
does
hold
not
and
take into
possess
account the
marijuana
overwhelming
in
number
states.
of misdemeanors or civil violations. In some instances, the laws are so obscure
It's pretty
and
much the same
vague
thing.
that even law enforcement and federal agencies are unaware that they exist. The United States Code is estimated to contain more than 5,000 crimes today. Just a decade ago, some scholars estimated that these were approximately 4,500 crimes, and the fact that these numbers are just estimates underscores the severity of the problem. According to a study by the Federalist Society, the number of federal criminal offenses increased by 30% between 1980 and 2004. There were 452 new federal criminal offenses enacted.
It's crapping out again. Yeah, great.
Scattered around the other 49 titles as well. The fact that this is only an estimate means that no one knows
See if it hangs
exactly
in.
how many federal laws subject U.S. citizens to criminal sanction. That includes Congress, the Department of Justice, and other federal agencies responsible for enforcing those laws, let alone your ordinary American. How did we get here?
I think we're back.
After all, our founding fathers first enumerated federal crimes in the Crimes Act of 1790. That act enumerated 23 federal crimes and established the punishments for those crimes. Among other crimes,
Chessboard,
the
what's
Crimes
up,
Act
my brother?
of 1790 established federal crimes for treason, piracy, and counterfeiting. While the legislation did establish
Agorizer,
certain
you're
crimes
right
against
about
the
that.
person, such as murder, and crimes against property, such as larceny, the federal jurisdiction of those crimes was limited to federal property and territories. Over the past century, Congress has lost its way. Instead of methodically and deliberatively crafting a common sense criminal code, Congress acted in a knee-jerk reaction to every minor and major crisis. In doing so, Congress believed that there always had to be a federal response to every headline and breaking news story. In fact, it was even, sometimes I get off script, sorry about that. But I mean, if you think about it, if you look in the 50s, you will see that there was a popular radio show, there was popular newspaper articles that said there ought to be a law. So if you've got the Reader's Digest, when I was a kid and you looked at it, every month or two there was some outrageous conduct, and the response was there ought to be a law. And of course, Congress responded and made many laws, some of them criminal in nature. One academic has aptly noted as it was the spate of bank robberies by John Dillinger in the 1930s that provoked passage of the federal bank robbery statute, the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby about the same time that
We'll
caused
catch you later,
passage of the
Jess.
federal statute on kidnapping, the assassination of President Kennedy in the early 1960s.
And the crazy thing
that
about John
prompted the
Dillinger, they
statute on
just shot him on the
presidential
spot. They didn't
assassination,
even tell him to
and the killing of
sit
Senator
down or,
Robert Kennedy in the late
surrender.
60s that resulted in the passage of a statute finally making it a federal crime to kill a member of Congress. More recently, we saw the enactment of Sarbanes-Oxley in response to the Enron scandal. All of us on this dais have witnessed this phenomenon among our colleagues. Some have termed this the accumulation approach to offenses, whereby Congress has simply accumulated new offenses for 200 years or so with little examination or reformulation of existing offenses, which has resulted in serious
Yeah,
overlaps
Agorizer,
in
I do
coverage
remember
and
that.
irrationalities among offense penalties, which create new possibilities for disparity in treatment or double punishment for the same harm or evil. This leads to absurdities. For example, the Code of Federal Regulations makes it a federal crime to try to sell a quarantined zebra while it is still in quarantine. In another example, 16 U.S.C. sections 703 and 50 CFR section 20.91a make it a federal crime to offer to buy swan feathers for use in making a woman's hat. According to one scholar, the proliferation of crimes makes it extraordinarily difficult to ferret out the law applicable to a particular factual situation. It also creates unfairness within federal law, which provides federal prosecutors with a near limitless menu to pursue criminal defendants.
Yeah, don't pick up
And
a
when Congress
goose
isn't
feather
creating new criminal code provisions, it is passing laws
or
that
an eagle
allow
feather.
unelected bureaucrats to write regulations that carry civil and criminal penalties.
It's kind of funny how it
What
would
we all too
prosecute you
often
for a
forget is
feather
that
that's
many
biodegradable.
of the problems we seek to solve are actually state and local issues. Under the federal system, the U.S. is enforcing the criminal law, close quote. And, quote, our national government is one of delegated powers alone. Under our federal system, the administration of criminal justice rests with the states, except as Congress, acting within the scope of those delegated powers, has created offenses against the United States, close quote.
Now, you can
Congress
keep
is
the
not
swan's
limited
fluffy,
and
you just can't
continues to
sell the
add federal
feathers.
crimes to our federal code. Congress can and should restrain from over-legislating on issues that should be left to state and local governments. This hearing is an opportunity to examine potential legislation introduced in past Congresses to restrict federal agencies' ability to criminalize conduct that a reasonable person would consider lawful. We have wonderful, excellent, expert witnesses today, and I've read every one of your testimonies that you have submitted, and I think it is so important. I look forward to hearing what you have to say today. One of you has said every criminal record comes with a host of consequences.
Yeah, Blade,
that
you
we
write
rarely
about a
think
lot of that.
And I'm talking about the results of the abundance of criminal offenses, but also with what happens to those who are charged and even convicted. These collateral consequences are legal and regulatory restrictions that limit or prohibit people convicted of crimes from accessing employment, business and occupational licensing, housing, voting, education, and other opportunities. Another of you has said the sheer quantity of federal regulation on the books today would require about 3 years to read if reading was your full-time job. Another of you said, and you quoted James Madison, I appreciated this, from Federalist 62, it will be of little avail to the people if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read or so incoherent that they cannot be understood. The Congressional Research Service, Justice Department, and the ABA have all tried and failed to count the federal criminal laws. But
That
we
should
believe there may be around
terrify
4,000 existing
everybody.
federal criminal laws, but even this massive number is dwarfed by
What,
incredibly
where a
high
law is not
estimates
understood?
that Americans are subjected to about 300,000.
Well, not just where it's not understood, but there are so many of them, no one can even quantify it.
Also, the note
Sadly, it's
that
reality. People still
prosecutions,
actually will pass
even
that.
politically inspired,
Well,
ones
that's
are
like that
protected
book, 3
from their
Felonies a Day.
legitimacy because of the overabundance of these criminal laws that Congress keeps putting into place. Another pointed out that 50% of laws related to nonviolent and
I
non-drug
mean, hell, it
offenses
was illegal to
lack
have
the mens rea
even have
requirement,
alcohol
which
at
is
one point.
perhaps one of the
Yeah.
easiest solutions we could put into effect immediately.
Just
was a
because
mens
it's a
rea
law
requirement.
doesn't mean it's good.
I look forward to hearing from each of our witnesses, and with that, I yield back and recognize.
Yeah, we get
the
back to the
distinguished
fact that just because
ranking
these
member, Ms.
assholes
Jackson Lee,
pass
for
a
her
law
opening
doesn't
statement.
make it constitutional.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. This is a more than unique moment in history. We're having a hearing
Sheila
on the
Jackson Lee.
proliferation
Oh,
of
God,
the potential
Yeah.
and possibility
The
of
intellectual giant that she
over-federalization
is.
of laws. And we have both
Royal
the
pain in our
responsibility to keep
asses.
this nation safe and the responsibility to ensure that laws have common sense.
Yeah, common sense,
and
my
that
ass is
the
status.
common sense is used effectively to ensure that we have good governance. And I think
Is it
that's
me or
what
she
we
kind of
all
looks
want
like she's
to
losing
see
hair a
and
little bit
hear.
there up top?
So I'm delighted to open
It's
with
because she
you
keeps
the
it pulled
hearing
back so hard, it's
on
ripping her scalp
overreach,
back.
an examination of
That or
federal
she's getting old. I
statutory
mean, how old is
and
she? 60s, 50s?
regulatory crimes
She's got to be
this
getting
morning
close to
on April
70.
30th.
Yeah,
Not
she's
open
definitely
these
losing it.
hearings without taking special note of the conditions of this nation around the world when America's youth are speaking out in loud voices, asking for guidance and help and assistance and trying to seek direction so that the some of the oldest laws
Oh, come on, Agorizer.
that
She has
are
a fashion
grounded in
sense. Look
our
at her. Even that
Constitution
Oh, thank
and
you.
Bill
big
of
green
Rights
troll she's got hanging on
are
her finger.
adhered to and respected. And that is the respect for people's differences and the respect for people's words. And as
And look, I
well,
just hope she doesn't
the
headbutt
respect
nobody.
for people's feelings. We cannot
Nice
have
one,
a
Coop.
nation of laws, of which I believe is our greatest strength, without understanding the passion for both our laws and the land that we love. We pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, for that, because it gives us the grounding of this hearing. So thank you, Chairman Biggs, for convening this hearing to discuss the very real problem of overcriminalization. For more than a decade, the overcriminalization of federal criminal
That's
law
a
has
five
been
head. Yeah,
identified as a
you got that right,
significant
Agorizer.
issue in our
She passed forehead a long time ago.
justice system. In 2014, the Congressional Research Service identified 435 offenses carrying criminal penalties that were created between 2008 and 2013. That means Congress created nearly 90 new criminal offenses each year during that 5-year period. This trend of expanding the scope of federal criminal statutes has resulted in an excess of ambiguous and broadly defined offenses, leading to confusion among citizens and even legal professionals. The potential for individuals to unknowingly commit a crime due to the complexity and sheer volume of federal laws not only undermines the principles of justice and fairness, but also erodes public trust in the legal system. Additionally, the proliferation of federal criminal laws has led to instances where individuals, particularly in marginalized communities, are unfairly targeted, prosecuted, and incarcerated for minor offenses that do not warrant such harsh punishment. This not only perpetuates social inequalities, but also strains already overburdened prison system. It is crucial for
Dude, Fluffy,
Congress
my
to
4-year-old can
re-examine
read better than
and
this lady.
streamline the federal criminal statutes to ensure that these laws are proportionate, clear, serve the federal interest, and promote the interests of justice and fairness.
BV, what's up this morning, my brother?
By focusing on meaningful and necessary criminal legislation, we can prevent further overcriminalization and safeguard the integrity of our legal system. Since the number
Does she not realize all the gun laws that she proposes are over criminalization?
has mushroomed to more than roughly 300,000, we should also consider whether the criminalization.
Oh, you knew it was coming, Matt.
That could be better addressed through civil means necessarily burdens the criminal justice system.
If we were doing this in the
However,
evenings, I would have had to do a
also
bingo
recognize
card
the
for it, and then we could do a
importance of
giveaway
these
again.
regulations, that they are sometimes criminalized for good reason, and that the criminal penalties often exist within a system that begins with administrative and civil tools that promote compliance and correction. Let us not forget that the purpose of prosecuting, punishing, and deterring future bad actors is to protect us from the harms contemplated by the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act. For instance, following an explosion at British Petroleum's Texas City refinery that killed 15 workers and injured another 180, BP pled guilty to knowing the violations of the Clean Air Act for its actions that led to the explosion and paid a
Come
$50
on,
million
connection.
criminal
Give me a
fine,
fucking
the
break.
largest ever at the time under the CAA. An examination of the company's safety record showed that Texas City was not an isolated occurrence, as the corporate culture had come to prioritize revenue over safety and maintenance. We have to learn, I believe, to match the punishment with the crime, of course, but we must also learn to understand the volume of criminalization and over-criminalization, and we must learn to work through the crisis of over-criminalization. I look forward to hearing from our very astute witnesses today and engaging in what I hope will be a productive conversation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reserve, but I will reserve and yield at the same time.
The gentlelady yields back. I understand that
The chairman is
the ranking
arriving.
member is, I think, arriving. And
we're checking, yes. I think he would like to come, so you.
Oh, look, Nadler's waddling his little penguin ass in there. And again, you're 100% right, Agariza. The federal government doesn't have general policing powers inside of the states.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important hearing. Roughly a decade ago, we learned through this committee's bipartisan overcriminalization task force, of which I was a member, that there are simply too many federal criminal laws on the books, that their reach is often too broad, and that too many individuals are
Good. Let's start off.
too long because of them.
Get rid of the NFA.
For too long, Congress under both parties has created new offenses or expanded existing laws in response to a national crisis, daily headlines, or highly publicized tragedies, often federalizing crimes traditionally prosecuted by the states without inquiry into whether the federal government should be involved at all. Instead of playing politics and trying to prove who is toughest on crime,
Sheila Jackson Lee talking about this is
more
ridiculous.
to prevent crime before it even happens. For instance, we could address substance abuse and mental health disorders, end the school-to-prison pipeline, cut off the iron pipeline that funnels guns into major cities like New York and Philadelphia, or provide real solutions for the unhoused. Nonetheless,
when he gets to the guns, then he wants more infringements,
of overcriminalization today,
more federal laws,
which has long been recognized as a major contributing factor to both mass incarceration and over-policing in America. But let's be clear, this hearing should not be about Donald Trump or about the January 6th rioters. The courts will decide whether they were properly charged. Nor should it serve as a platform to undermine the federal regulations
Fluffy.
that keep us.
Nadler talking about Antifa. Antifa is not real. It's made up.
Criminalization in the regulatory context is certainly cause for concern. We should remember that regulations
they claim
ensure
they're anti-fascist, but yet
clean
they
air,
commit fascist
drink
crimes.
clean water, consume safe food and medicines, and that our loved ones work in safe environments. This hearing should be about the countless
gotta love the
individuals,
world we're living in right now, Coop.
mostly black, brown, and poor, who for decades have borne the brunt of the overuse and abuse of criminal law in the federal system. As the number of federal criminal statutes has ballooned, overcriminalization has had wide-ranging negative impacts on individuals who are at a social or economic disadvantage.
Overcriminalization. How about Matt Hoover's case?
Disparities in access to legal resources,
and many others
leading
like
to the
them.
increased
There's
surveillance
many
and targeting of minority communities by law enforcement, or by driving mass incarceration. The Department of Justice continues to grapple with the costs of overcriminalization and mass incarceration, both fiscally and with respect to other resources such as manpower. That is why Congress should be working together to craft legislation that ensures that the resources of federal agencies, federal law enforcement is most effectively not wasted on the enforcement of crimes that are better handled by the states.
You got too many
We are
pages
to have a real
Scoop?
discussion about the problems associated
I
with
closed out a bunch of
overcriminalization and
shit.
solutions.
All right,
We must
because that
first
also affects
recognize
bandwidth.
the many forms that
Yeah,
overcriminalization takes
I'm gonna have to
in the
get with
federal criminal justice system. It occurs most
the internet
frequently through
company
federalizing crimes traditionally reserved for the
Actually,
unscrew
states,
is your fan hot by chance?
this because
duplicative and overlapping statutes, enacting vague or broad criminal statutes,
from Albany.
and enacting criminal statutes that fail to set mens rea standards. Whether Republican or Democrat, we should all agree that the resulting broad expansion of federal criminal law undermines any effort to provide just and proportionate punishment for criminal conduct and lessens the legitimacy of the criminal justice system overall. It is vitally important that we rein in the growth of the federal criminal code and ask whether all of the laws on the books are truly necessary and whether they are accomplishing what should be their ultimate goal, the protection of the public safety. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and before I yield back the balance of my time, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a written statement from Michael P. Heiskell, who's worked for more than a decade on the issue of overcriminalization.
Without objection.
And now I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Appreciate that. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's witnesses. We have Patrick Pertil, who serves as the Director of Legislative Affairs at Faith and Freedom Coalition and is the Charles Evans Hughes Lecturer in Politics at Colgate University. Previously, he practiced law advising corporations on formation, transactions, corporate governance, and compliance issues. And in the George W. Bush administration, he spent 3 years as Special Assistant to Deputy Attorney General, where he served on the Serious and Violent Offender Reentry Initiative Working Group. Well, thank you for being with us today, Mr. Pertil. Dr. Patrick McLaughlin. Dr.
Yeah, that would be the answer to a lot of it, Agorizer. Let's start repealing stupid shit.
Center at George Mason University. His research focuses primarily on regulation.
Start with the NFA and start working backwards.
Dr. McLaughlin has authored more than a dozen peer-reviewed studies on topics such as regulatory economics, administrative law, industrial organization, and international trade.
Completely get rid of the freaking ATF. That would help a lot.
Mr. Brett Tolman. Mr. Tolman is the founder of the Tolman Group, a public policy law firm that works to hold federal, state, and local governments accountable and advance transparency. He previously served as the United States Attorney for the District of Utah and has testified before Congress multiple times on criminal justice issues, including the First Step Act.
Hey, Coop.
Thank you, Mr. Tolman. Ms. Bianca Tylik, did I say that
Coop,
right?
you there?
Okay, thank you. Executive Director of Worth Rises, a nonprofit
Theoretically,
organization that advocates
correct
for
me if I'm wrong.
reform
Yeah,
of the
we're
criminal
back.
justice system.
Is the
She's
FBI
previously worked at the
theoretically
Brennan
supposed
Center for
to actually
Justice
have
and
authority
the
over the
ACLU and
ATF
co-founded
if they're
College
doing
Way,
something
a
wrongful?
program that worked to prepare students in Rikers Island to pursue higher education.
I don't know, to be
Thank
honest with you.
for being with us, Mr. Tyler.
The FBI, unless
We
I check,
welcome
can
all of
actually
our
arrest them if
witnesses.
they're doing some
We will
wrongdoing.
begin by swearing you in. If you would each
But-
please rise.
Hell, I mean, the FBI is just as corrupt as the ATF. So
Well, I know, but if we had a solid FBI, I think
Do
they
you
would actually
swear
go
or
after
affirm under
them.
penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God?
Even the U.S. Marshals,
Let the
too.
record reflect the witness has answered, each of the witnesses has answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. And I will, if you get close, I'll probably tap like this a little bit. Not trying to break your flow, but just trying to let you know that you're nearing the end of your time. I mean, your time for testimony. You might have all the time in the world. I don't know, but just want to make clear of that. So with that, Mr. Head, you may. Mr. Head. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pertil. Yes, you may proceed.
Ozzy, good morning again, brother.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Ranking Member, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on the topic of overcriminalization, its impact on our criminal justice system, and its impact on the rule of law. I commend the committee for examining this important but often overlooked issue. The power to punish is the greatest domestic power that the government has, the ability to take life, liberty, property, And as government continues to grow,
And like the
exponentially,
ATF
the number
kicking
of
someone's
acts
door in at 6
and
o'clock in the
beliefs
morning
that
to
it
shoot them in the
prohibits
face.
has continued to grow as well. The overcriminalization, the proliferation of laws they're often vague or ambiguous terms. They expand the scope of criminal behavior beyond reasonable limits. This proliferation has resulted in a regime of statutes that criminalize conduct previously considered innocuous or non-criminal. Consequently, individuals,
I mean, what
including
else
those with
besides
no
drugs and
intent to
firearms
break
has there
the
been
law, find
conduct
themselves
as well,
ensnared in a
dude?
complex web of statutes and regulations that are difficult, if not possible, to navigate. It's
if you wanted
illuminating
to
to
get
remember
into
that
some
in
of that,
common law, there are only
drugs,
9 major
guns,
felonies: murder, robbery, arson, rape, for example, and various misdemeanors. And our Constitution itself only specified 3 felonies within the body of the document, although, as the chairman pointed out, one of the first acts of Congress was to create another 23, I believe it was. Certainly a number that was comprehensible. But today we've got more than 5,000 federal crimes, and there are so many rules and regulations with criminal consequence that no one is able to count them. A complete and systematic effort to count stops somewhere just north of 300,000, including the federal regulations. And this is one of the chief reasons that 1 in 3 Americans today has a criminal record of some sort. And that many Americans, frankly, have lost faith and trust in the impartiality of the justice system and in the equal application of our laws. It can't be overstated how dangerous this loss of faith and trust in the justice system is.
Hey,
For a
good morning, brother.
Republic. So why is this important? I think
Because of
criminalization is
politicalization, also
important for several
using
key reasons.
agencies to go
First
after
is
political
that it
entities is
enables
one of them,
the
dude.
proliferation of criminal laws tilts the
So
playing
yeah,
field
they
too
lost
far
faith in your
in
justice.
favor of the prosecutor. And it's effectively undermined the Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. According to the American Bar Association, 98% of criminal cases in federal court end with a plea. And there's substantial evidence that innocent people are to get pleas because of the
Yeah, this is definitely getting annoying.
I think that this is the nature of the problem when you have these many criminal statutes. You're going to have this happen. And too many laws make overcharging or charge stacking one of the most common tools used by federal prosecutors, which is why trials have become essentially just rare artifacts. And overcharging can be used not only to force a plea deal, but it can also, if you do decide to exercise your Sixth Amendment right and go to trial, overcharging also can influence the jury into thinking that, well, there's so many charges, one of these must be accurate. So you can see situations where defendants are acquitted on a number of charges, but sometimes juries feel like they have to come back with a guilty charge on something just because there were so many charges to begin with.
Yeah, well, then prosecutors set that shit
when
up.
so many criminal laws make it impossible for an ordinary citizen, or probably anyone for that matter, as you noted, that it would take 3 years to simply read through all of the criminal statutes and regulations on the books today. But that means that ordinary citizens can't actually know what the law is. The legal maxim used to be that ignorance of the law is no excuse, and this made sense when we had 9 felonies at common law. And those felonies were inherently blameworthy. You don't need to. Everyone understands that murder is wrong. You don't need to know that someone has.
Blades, they try to come back and say that they weren't wearing body cams that day.
Offenses.
I think they were, but they're not
If
going to let that
citizen
cam
cannot
footage
be
out.
certain that they're in compliance with the law. The problem is with the overly complicated legal regime. It's not with the citizenry. It's because we're criminalizing actions and beliefs that are not inherently blameworthy. And when you add this
DD,
to,
what's up, brother?
the way that we go about charging now and indicting, New York Judge Saul Wackler famously observed years ago that if a district attorney wanted, a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. And the simple truth is that the mass of federal criminal laws and regulations makes this easier. It makes every American a potential criminal. Rather than seeing a crime and then investigating to find the perpetrator, the staggering labyrinth of criminal statutes and regulations means you can identify an individual for prosecution and dig until you find some rule that they've violated.
You're over your time limit.
So I'm sorry. Well, I will stop there. But the only other thing I would say is you did mention that this comes with a host of collateral consequences. And I think that the real danger, and why I think it is important what you're doing here today, is the real danger is that it undermines the public confidence in the.
Well, the thing is, they're just going to talk today. It's not like they're going to go in and start revising this shit and get rid of stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Pertot. And now I recognize Dr. McLaughlin for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chair Biggs, Ranking Member Nadler, and Ranking Member Jackson Lee, members of the committee.
Dude,
Patrick
BB, I don't
McLaughlin,
know.
Senior
Something's
Research
weird.
Fellow at
Something
the
weird
Mercatus
last
Center at
time I
George
heard was
Mason
going on with
University.
Risky.
The Mercatus Center is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research center dedicated to bridging the gap between academic ideas and real-world problems. Thanks again for inviting me here to testify today. For more than a decade, I specialize in using computer algorithms to quantify various aspects of accumulated laws and regulations. I learned early on in my career that it would be impossible for any human to read the entirety of federal laws and regulations.
At least it's working a lot better than it was last time.
I devised computational solutions instead.
Yeah, it's trying to hang in there
my work
now.
on regulatory accumulation has demonstrated how the buildup of rules over time significantly slows economic growth. But I have also studied the accumulation of crimes as defined in the U.S. Code.
Yeah, that would help
On that
a lot,
topic,
man.
I have 3 main points today. First, there has been a significant increase in the number of federal criminal statutes and regulations over the past
We could
few
do it just
decades.
a lot of this could be solved just by basically a loser
federal
pays.
criminal laws over the past few decades.
So if the government prosecutes you and they lose the case, they pay all your legal fees, and then they pay you
expansion of
restitution.
federal crimes may duplicate state laws or existing
Hey,
federal laws,
hey, Coop.
resulting in redundant crimes.
You do plasma
A
cuts.
few years ago, I worked on a project that used
Yeah.
some of these advanced computer algorithms to create an inventory of criminal laws within the U.S. Code. Using a carefully cultivated set of search terms, such as the phrases imprisoned for not more than or shall be guilty of, we were able to estimate not only how many crimes Congress has written into the U.S. Code as of 2019, but also how that number has changed over time. Our work revealed a significant increase in the number of federal criminal statutes over the past 3 decades. We estimated that 3,825 federal crimes were on the books as of 1994. By the year 2019, that number had increased by more than a third to 5,199.
You think you can plasma cut that?
Interestingly, more than half of the total growth in that entire 22-year period.
Yeah, I'd have to play with the design, see how it would work. But yeah.
All right, let me know, man. I'd be interested if you can do that.
This matched our expectations because a tough on crime agenda played a significant part in. I recently ran the same algorithm on the Code of Federal Regulations to estimate the crimes that are defined in federal regulations. I estimate that an additional 2,157 to 2,876 crimes are defined in similar ways as in the U.S. Code within the Code of Federal Regulations as of 2023. Now, the number 300,000 has been.
Yeah, I thought I saw the same thing, Blade.
I will just point out that I'm using the.
That's
same
why I said I
algorithms
thought
to
they.
look for
I'm
these
seriously
search
think they
terms that
had
were
video. They're just
devised
not
by
going to let
looking
it
at the
out.
statutes and applying it to the CFR, to the regulations. So my number is probably a floor, probably not the ceiling. But anyway, that means the total number of crimes defined across federal laws, including both statutes and regulations, likely falls at least in the 7,000 to 8,000 range. Now, a longstanding criticism of the haphazard expansion of federal crimes is that new federal criminal laws may duplicate state laws or existing federal laws in a patchwork of redundant crimes. This duplication has a number of downsides. It erodes principles of federalism by having federal authorities police conduct that has been traditionally viewed as better left to state and local governments. This duplication also dilutes political accountability because the public is not able to discern who has primary authority for addressing a particular crime or whom to blame if a crime is not addressed. And finally, duplicative federal crimes give prosecutors wide latitude to charge different people committing the same offenses with different crimes, opening the door for bias into factor into charging decisions. The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, and that rate seems obviously linked to the number of crimes defined in law. The number of federal prison inmates alone has risen by 500% since 1980. Any action by Congress to reduce the number of duplicative or otherwise undesirable crimes could only serve to reduce that incarceration rate. The accumulation of laws and regulations and the crimes that are defined within them should not be assumed to be harmless. The U.S. needs legislative reforms to simplify federal laws and regulations, period. Such reforms could involve reducing the number of federal crimes, clarifying the language of statutes, considering decriminalization or the use of civil penalties. For
I don't think anything will come of it. No one from the ATF is going to suffer anything from it.
Reforms like these are crucial to ensuring that laws are fair, just, and proportionate to the behaviors they aim
No
to
one got in
regulate,
trouble after Ruby
safeguarding
Ridge or
against the negative
Waco.
consequences
This
of
ain't going to get him in
overcriminalization.
trouble.
Thank you again for inviting me here today to discuss this
Hey,
important
Coop.
topic.
Thank you,
Actually
Dr.
thinking about it,
McLaughlin.
you know who
Ms.
gets to
Dalek, we recognize you now for
Flurry
your
get
5
them on their
minutes.
toes though?
You might need to
Ted
hit
Cruz.
that
He
microphone
actually
button.
questioned the FBI
Thank
for
you.
wrongdoing
There we
on
go.
January
Thank
6th,
you.
but
Good morning,
imagine if we do
Chairman
the same
Biggs,
thing to the
Ranking Member
BATF.
Jackson Lee, and members of the committee. I
Well,
am Bianca Tylik, Executive
even if they
Director
get
of
him in
Work
these
Rises,
hearings,
a
they're just going to
national
lie the whole
organization
damn
working
time,
to
and they're never
remove
going to
Well,
get caught.
financial
even in
incentives
denial,
to
they know there's
incarcerate
something up.
people. I'm also a crime victim, and I've had a loved one who's been murdered. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the
That's
issue of
celiac, huh?
overcriminalization. We all want safe and thriving communities, and we can get there by working
It
together.
just
While
becomes
the
a whole
others
lot
on
of
this
political
panel
theater,
are
man.
and will continue to speak about some of the legal specifics of overreach in the criminal
Watching the
code,
hearings after
I
Waco,
cover
watching
in
hearings
my,
after
which I also
Ruby
cover in my
Ridge, because
written
you can find
testimony. I
those
will
hearings.
focus my comments today on the impact that
It's political
federal
theater and nothing
overcriminalization
happens.
has on the American people. To start, any discussion of overcriminalization at the federal level must reflect on the significant influence it has over state policies, especially when funding is attached. This was the case throughout the 1990s and 2000s when Congress provided federal funding for prison construction to states that enacted tough on crime laws like mandatory minimums. Unfortunately, today, federal programs like civil asset forfeiture continue to root the issue of federal
Civil asset
overcriminalization in
forfeiture is
state and
huge.
local budgetary policy. As a result of overcriminalization at the federal and state level, someone is arrested every 3 seconds in the United States. This amounts to 10.5 million arrests annually, with over 80% for low-level offenses like drugs and disorderly conduct. Those arrested are disproportionately Black and brown and low-income people, leading to the over-incarceration and over-surveillance of these communities. Core to the overcriminalization crisis is that even committing a minor offense can impart a lifetime of negative consequences. A simple arrest can lead to job loss, while a criminal conviction and worse yet, incarceration can threaten the financial stability and economic mobility of the person convicted and their family for years, even generations to come. Consider that roughly 57% of people in federal prison are the parents of minor children, and more than half were the primary breadwinners for their families before they were incarcerated. Though most incarcerated people in prison work, their penny wages prevent them from sending
Civil
anyone
asset
home.
forfeiture is
So
nothing more than
unsurprisingly, about
the
half
government
of
legalizing
families with an
robbery.
incarcerated loved one struggle to make ends meet. And it's not just the loss of income at issue.
Especially when you
Families
consider
end up with
you don't
new
even have to,
egregious
you don't have to
expenses
get found
facing
guilty of
food
anything.
and hygiene products and communication services for their incarcerated loved ones. To make matters worse, funds
Hey,
deposited by
you've got this
families
amount of
with their
cash on you. That's
incarcerated loved
over the
ones
amount
were
of cash we
garnished
say you can
for
carry, so
court
we're just
fines
taking your
and
shit.
fees. The Federal Bureau of Prisons recently sought to garnish as much as 75% of what
Didn't that
families
happen to
deposited.
a Marine?
Thankfully,
A Marine
Congress
veteran
has
that was
recently
driving on the
created some
roadside
relief.
and cops
For
actually
decades,
pretty much
1 in 3
confiscated all his money.
families with an
Yeah, we
incarcerated loved
covered
one
that
has
one
gone
one
into
day.
debt trying to
That and a
stay
couple other
connected over
cases of civil
expensive
asset
calls.
forfeiture.
Some cut off contact, unable to afford it, which is detrimental to correctional officers and public safety, with studies repeatedly showing that when incarcerated people are support systems, facility violence decreases and reentry success increases. But Congress passed the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable
No,
Communications Act to increase regulation of the
you're
prison
going to
telecom
spend
industry. It made all calls free in
thousands and
federal
thousands
prisons
of
through the
dollars
CARES
to
Act,
fight
a
anything like
policy I
civil
urged
asset
Congress
forfeiture.
to implement permanently. For too long, women like Martha Wright Reed, who skipped medication to afford calls with her grandson in federal prison, have carried the cost of overcriminalization. Indeed, over 80% of carceral costs, like the cost of calls, commissary, and court fees, are borne by women, largely Black and brown women. See, the issue of overcriminalization is not just about criminal justice.
Let's not forget,
It's
there are
about
some people
gender
that really
equity,
do need to be in
children's
prison. They're
health,
violent criminals.
family
They need to
unity,
fucking be there.
economic justice, and more
There are a
that we
whole lot of
don't have
people
the time
trapped
to
up
talk
behind
about
some
today, like
bullshit that
privacy rights and regressive taxes.
could have been in many other
The intersection of these
programs
issues,
outside of
all
going to
or
prison.
one of which may matter to you, should bring us collectively to the table to address them. And importantly, overcriminalization does not just impact those arrested and sentenced, but all of us. Overcriminalization dramatically hinders public safety by exacerbating the social conditions that lead to crime in the first place. But in doing so, it lines the pockets of the $80 billion niche prison industry with a deep financial interest in the overcriminalization of Americans. In fact, major players in the prison industry have plainly stated that declining crime rates, which improve our safety, hurt their business. An industry so offensive that it cannot advertise uses public fear-mongering to hide its interests.
Honestly, that's a lie right there, because
A huge reason for
like legalizing
overcriminalization
marijuana
is an
didn't do
industry is
shit.
an
It actually
impediment
increased
to
the
passing
drug
smart
market on
policies
there,
that
an
promote
illegal drug
safety,
trade.
freedom, and
That's
justice.
because they
And we
do it
must
just
put an
fucking
end to it.
stupid. I
In
mean, it
closing,
needs to be an
I
all-around
would be remiss not
legalization
to mention that the
and
roots of
call it a day.
overcriminalization and even the prison
Yeah,
industry
well, it's still
date
not going
back
to
to the
stop the
exception of the
legalization
13th
of
Amendment,
fentanyl and
which gave way for the
cocaine
passage
and
of Black
meth and
codes during the
heroin.
Reconstruction era that applied only to newly freed Black people and criminalized minor offenses like
There's
vagrancy
not really much a
to feed
solution.
the brutal practice of convict
Well, the
leasing,
solution is
by
his
which
personal
states
choice.
leased incarcerated people to private businesses.
If you want to put
More than
that
a
shit into your
century
body,
later,
you're an adult. Put
slavery
that shit
is
into your
still
body.
still legal as
If you
criminal
commit a
punishment.
crime while you're doing it, then you go to prison for your
I
crime
just-
that you committed.
More than a century later, slavery is still
Like,
legal as criminal punishment, and we are still
so, like,
overcriminalizing.
Think about it. The only
minor
reason we're
offenses
dealing with
and
fentanyl right now
pushing
is
on
because
Black
they
and brown
cracked down
people.
on
I urge
pills.
you to not just seek
No,
minor
but
tweaks
I'm
to
talking about
existing
like as
policy,
far
but
as you're
truly
talking
shift
about
the
making a
trajectory of
crime
our
for
country
drugs, be
by
like
ending the exception of the 13th
equalization,
Amendment,
like,
ending federal
say
overcriminalization,
I
and
drank a
using
lot
the
of
federal
alcohol,
power,
I'm
of course,
drunk,
to
and I'm
incentivize
disorderly
state
conduct,
and
and I'm interviewing
localities to
people,
do the
so
same.
that's a
Appreciate
crime
the
right there,
opportunity.
right?
Thanks, Ms. Deilig, for being here. The chair now
Like that?
recognizes Mr. Tolman for his 5 minutes.
Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member Jackson Lee, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to
Hold on, you
testify
lost me a little
today.
bit on that one.
I am a former United States Attorney for the District of
If
Utah,
I
appointed by
drank
George Bush
alcohol,
in
right, like I had a few
2006.
beers, but I got
Today,
drunk,
however, I serve as the Executive
and
Director
I
of Right
got
on
so
Crime, a
drunk that
national
actually I
criminal
didn't realize I
justice
was actually hitting
campaign
people.
focusing on conservative,
That's a crime right
data-driven
there, right?
solutions to reduce crime,
That's what you're
restore
gonna make him?
victims, reform
Yeah.
offenders, and lower taxpayer costs. As U.S. Attorney, I remember a plaque in the halls of justice that read, "The hallmark of fairness in the administration of justice is consistency. And yet this principle can be easily lost when there are too many federal criminal laws to keep track of, let alone understand." James Madison warned of this issue in Federalist Paper 62, writing, "It will be of little avail to the people if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or
Yeah,
so
we can talk about
incoherent
the
that they
opiate
cannot be
overprescription,
understood."
but look at what we're dealing
Madison
with
was onto something, because we have no idea how many crimes are on the books, as many have commented today. Nobody really
now.
knows the number
Pills
of
were
crimes.
bad, and
What
there
we
were a
do
lot
know
of
is that
issues with them.
overcriminalization offends
They
both
cracked
sides
down on
of the
pills.
aisle
Now
and
what do
is
you get? You get
antithetical
fentanyl.
to our nation's founding principles. Criminal laws now cover so many facets of our everyday lives that the government can target citizens with impunity. Many of these crimes are easy to prosecute because many lack
So, I mean,
mens
we
rea.
went from a bad pill
mens rea
problem to
element.
an
To commit a
absolutely
crime, you have to do it and you have to mean to do it,
insane
or at
fentanyl
least know
problem.
that it could happen. But often mental state requirements are abandoned, allowing the government to prove its case by a person's actions alone. This isn't how our criminal laws are meant to function. The bloated administrative state contributes greatly to overcriminalization. Faceless bureaucrats have made thousands of activities illegal, but they don't have to justify their decisions to the voter. Lastly, overcriminalization encroaches on state prosecution powers. When Congress oversteps into the traditionally state-held criminal prosecution space, state offenses can be unnecessarily replicated, making everything a crime and everyone a potential criminal. Overcriminalization is problematic in normal times, but we're living in unique times
Yeah,
with political pressures
maybe
taking
the
precedent
government
over the rule of
caused
law.
the black market.
I've worked in the criminal justice system for over 25 years and cannot believe how the current
And they
DOJ
they
is
destroyed people.
choosing
So
to throw
someone
away
had
the rule of law to
pills on
protect
them, they send
political
this
enemies.
fucker to prison.
When I was
for
U.S. Attorney, I was
5
determined to
years.
prosecute both Republicans or
When
Democrats
if they really
alike,
had a problem
so
or
far as
causing
the
an
facts
issue,
and
they
law
should have been in a
supported the
rehab
charges.
program or something
Right?
along
But
those
times have
lines.
changed. Now federal prosecutors use their massive discretion and the overabundance of applicable laws to target whomever they choose. Even state prosecutors have jumped on the bandwagon, with the most relevant example being the targeted prosecution of President Trump by DA Alvin Bragg. This case didn't have enough evidence to support a legitimate federal charge, but prosecutors seeking to gain political points have chosen to target political enemy number one. Even for Democrats, this should be concerning, because if
And
it's
there were,
Donald
man,
Trump
there were a
today,
lot of
it could be
issues
you
with
tomorrow.
pain where people could have,
And prosecutions, even
hell,
politically
even with
motivated
just
ones, have the guise
marijuana,
of
if you let them,
legitimacy and are difficult to undercut or
smoke some
question.
weed versus being on
Partner
fucking
this with our
Percocet,
overcriminalization
you never
problem,
would have
it's easy
addicted
to
them
see
to an
how power
opioid
can
in
be
the first
abused.
place.
Justice Scalia
And there are a
pinpointed
lot
this
of other
issue
things
almost
out
30
there the
years ago,
FDA
warning that
won't
prosecutors, if
approve
left to their
because
own
it would get in the
devices,
way of
can
opiates.
pick people they think they should get rather than cases that need to be prosecuted. And with there being thousands of crimes to choose from, a prosecutor can target a man and then search the books to pin an offense on him. This should scare. My written testimony goes into more detail on how to avoid and solve this problem, but I'll quickly summarize some suggestions. First, Congress should practice restraint in creating more federal criminal laws. Decriminalization should be as a criminal statute. It must ensure that it has a mens rea element. Also, this committee can revive broader mens rea reform by considering bills that attach a default mens rea to every statutory and regulatory offense. Next, Congress can conduct robust oversight. President Trump issued an executive order that told
So-called
agencies to
professionals.
specify mens rea standards and make regulatory crimes understandable. President Biden undid this executive order. Why? This committee can get to the bottom of that and urge the administration to take overcriminalization seriously. In a similar vein, agencies' powers must be reined in. The fourth branch shouldn't be able to impose weighty criminal sanctions on Americans. This power belongs to the people's representatives. Overcriminalization threatens our public safety, individual liberties, and the fair administration of justice. Consistent application of the law is a cornerstone of our criminal justice system, and addressing our overcriminalization is a critical step to achieving this goal. I appreciate your time and look forward to any questions.
Yeah, AG, I was too.
Thank you, Mr. Tolman.
But hey, trust the science and all that.
Appreciate, all of the statements that you've given to us. And now, Chair recognizes Mr. Tiffany, the gentleman from Wisconsin, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really
Oh,
appreciate
doctors
you
are so
term
full of
crisis
shit, man,
in
it
your
ain't
opening
even funny.
remarks. Everything in America is a crisis today, and when everything's a crisis, nothing is. And it's really unfortunate that the word gets used the way it does, especially to drive public policy. Mr. Tolman,
I think
it's
too,
attributed to one of the
science is
worst
flawed, because any
despots in the history of the world,
mathematic
Joseph
it's
Stalin. Show me
flawed.
the man, and I will show you the crime. What role do federal agencies play in the
Look at this,
codification of
man.
the criminal
So
code
there's
through
tons
better
and
regulation?
tons of people
Well, it's fascinating to me that
that have actually
three entities, the ABA, the Department of Justice,
gotten past
and the research agencies,
serious
all
mental
attempted
scars
to identify
by
the number
doing
of regulations that have
psychedelics.
criminal penalties. And
You're
it is,
talking-
And our
it
government
is an
studied it. Our
application
government knows that that would
of
possibly
Congress to
help
let
a whole lot of
anybody
people,
pass a
but
criminal
instead
law.
they'd
But
rather throw
I
all these
don't-
other
I don't
drugs
necessarily
at them
blame
and fuck
Congress
them
on
up even
this. I
worse.
think it is
You're talking about
it is
people
the
have
branch, the
PTSD.
executive
Can
branch,
psychedelics be abused?
branches
Yeah.
seeking to
Yeah.
expand that regulatory power, and we're bloating these agencies with both the power and then no accountability.
Are there
I mean,
any
I've seen
federal agencies,
freaking
are there any you name in particular that
some
have,
things where, especially
exceeded
some
their
vets,
authority
man, they
more
would
than
be
others that are
on.
repeat
I think
offenders?
one dude had like 20-something pill bottles that he was on
You certainly have
that these doctors kept
history has
prescribing
proven
him.
the
And each
IRS
medication
has
had its
gone
own side
from not
effects,
a
so they
single
give him another
agent
drug for the
carrying a
side effect.
firearm to now
And I think he went down to
carrying
Mexico
firearms.
and
You
did
know,
one of the
what is the
psychedelic
evolution of
programs
that?
down
The
there. It came off
evolution
all of his
is
medicine.
a regulatory body
It was
becoming a
healthier than
police
he's been in
body.
decades.
And so we
Yep.
can go down the list of all the
What's the other
acronyms
thing?
that are now
Ketamine. You ever heard of ketamine
moving
too?
from a regulatory body to a police
Yeah,
body.
ketamine's another one.
Ms. Tylek,
I mean, obviously the
are
stuff
you
can be
saying in
abused, so
your
can alcohol.
testimony that slavery still exists in America?
There's also another one called San Pedro. You heard of that one?
Excuse me. Yes, slavery is actually still legal
Sounds
in America.
familiar.
It's not just
It's
only
a
that it
cactus.
exists
It
in
literally
practice,
gets you high,
but according
but
to the 13th Amendment,
it
there's an
actually
exception
helps
clause that
you
says
relieve
except
you,
as
kind of like
punishment
the
for a
ketamine
crime,
treatment, but it's a little
which
bit different.
means, by law, slavery
Yeah,
is
there's
still
plenty of
allowed.
things out there
You
like that
notice,
that could
is there, in the
basically
work that you've done, is there a greater
natural
impact with this,
that
call it
could be used
overcriminalization?
to
Is
solve a
there
lot of
greater impact
conditions,
on
but
men
our
versus
government,
women?
the FDA, and all them don't
For
want
sure.
those things used because
The
they want people on the
92% of the
pills.
prison population is
Well,
men.
because they can make
So
money off it.
undoubtedly, there's an impact from incarceration specifically, and most of those arrested are also men. However, women are carrying in many ways the actual cost of incarceration, literally fiscally. 87% of the cost of, for example, phone calls and visits and court fees are actually covered by women.
Mr. Pirtle, do you
Now,
accept
when it
that
came to the
having a
COVID
greater
deaths, our
impact on
hospitals
men
killed more
than
people
women with this
than the COVID virus
overcriminalization?
killed.
I do think that that is the case, and I do think the prison population bears that out.
Can you give examples or give me something briefly that causes you to say that, other than the statistic 92%?
It would cause me to say that it's had overcriminalization has had a greater impact on men than women.
Yes.
Really, I would kind of lean in on, unless you're saying that there's a higher degree of criminality between one sex or the other. I would think that there's probably, I think that the prison population probably bears some of that out.
Mr. McLaughlin, have any Supreme Court decisions of the last decade been helpful in this? If you believe
Yeah,
there's
2 weeks to flatten the
overcriminalization,
curve.
have there been any Supreme Court decisions that have been helpful
Fucking
in reining
horseshit.
that in?
One case comes to mind.
You know,
but keep
another
in
thing
mind,
too
I'm
could
an
be brought up
economist,
the
not
mention
an
of
attorney,
psychedelics
but
and
I
other
do
drugs that
recall.
actually do help. That's
In fact,
what's
I jotted down the name
stuff
of the
out
case,
there.
Yates versus United States, where the
Part of that could be a contributing factor why we
crime
lose
created by the
20 vets a day to
Sarbanes-Oxley Act
suicide.
was applied in the case of
Oh, there's no
fishing
doubt that
boat.
plays into it.
The captain of the boat destroyed evidence of keeping a fish that was too small to keep, but he was prosecuted under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. That comes to mind as an example of using a crime that was created for one situation, financial fraud, applied somewhere else.
Do you recall ultimately what the penalty was that he paid for that?
Well, ultimately, the Supreme Court overruled, threw away the prosecution, so I don't believe there actually was any.
Yeah, but it took
How many
thousands of
fixes?
dollars to get there.
I would advise
Hundreds
active
of thousands.
review of both regulations and statutes to first find stuff that's obviously outdated, obviously doesn't fit modern society, but also I think you can address more serious things. One example I would point to for review of old things that we no longer want is the base realignment and closure
Gentleman's time has
commissions.
expired, but you may finish your answer.
That might be an example to point to.
What about just the
I interrupted
ATF
you.
being able to make rules up as they go?
Please restate what you were saying.
I was saying one example
it's an
of
agency.
government reform where we look back on
Take it
things
easy,
that we
AG.
didn't want
Have a good
anymore
day,
and try to
brother.
figure out what could we get rid of was the base realignment and closure commissions.
Okay.
A similar approach might work here.
Thank you very much.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tiffany. Chair recognizes the ranking member from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Back to Mr. Penguin again.
Ms. Tyler, you launched the Corrections Accountability Project at the Urban Justice Center. As I understand it, the goal was to eliminate the influence of commercial interests on the criminal justice system and those it touches. Could you explain the various ways in which the criminal justice system has been financially exploited?
Absolutely, thank you. The Corrections Accountability Project is the predecessor to Worth Rises. And I think one of the ways to think about it is the ways in which the prison industry is both working in tandem with sort of the correctional system, but also at times exploiting the correctional system for its own gains. And so, what we see is a massive industry that has been built, and sometimes in conflict with the correctional system. So a correctional system that wants to provide care with correctional healthcare companies that are actually cutting costs dramatically and in many ways harming people significantly inside of prisons and jails. And so that's just one example. But there is a really broad industry here that has kind of leached its way onto our carceral system.
And so you believe that the prison industry has come to depend on stripping people of their liberty?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, if you take the biggest example, right, the private prison operators that are actually publicly traded, they have minimum occupancy guarantees embedded in their contracts with agencies that are 80%, 90% requiring all of their beds, or 80% or 90% of their beds to be filled. So there's no doubt that they have an interest in putting more people behind bars.
Do you believe the private prison industry should be abolished?
Absolutely. I think there's no
Coop,
world
can you remind me what
that
that
we
is?
can have a just system where people
The
are
private prison
profiting
industry?
off of putting people in prisons and jails. There's only two ways for a business to
Never
make
heard of a
money.
private
Okay,
My
so
career before
the
what
federal
I did
government
today
didn't
was
want
on
to
Wall
foot the
Street. I
bill
worked at
paying
the
for
Goldman
prisons
Sachs
and
and the
the
Morgan
running
Stanleys and the
prisons and
Citigroups
stuff
of the
like
world.
that.
There's two ways
Okay.
you make money.
So they
You either
kind of
increase
save
revenue,
money. They
which puts
pay
prison industry
private
means more
companies
bodies behind bars for
to
longer, or you cut
basically
costs,
run the
and
prisons
expenses, which means basically worse
for them. They
quality
kind of
of care.
How does the
subcontract it
prison
out,
industry
basically.
increase?
So in other
So
words,
they
what's
get
the federal
paid
government?
so much.
They lobby
Yeah,
and
so they get paid so
give
much
campaign financing
for
donations to
each
those who are
inmate that
interested
they
in toughen
have.
crime laws.
Really?
They have done that
Yeah.
extensively.
Now, thank you.
So you're
Approximately
saying the federal
68
government's not
million
paying for
Americans
that?
have a
It's actually the
criminal record.
subcontractor that's
We're
also
aware
paying
of the
it?
direct costs of law enforcement, prison
Yeah, the
enforcement,
subcon. It's
as well as the
basically
cost of businesses in
that'd be the
economy.
simplest way to
Can
put
you
it. It's like
discuss the cost of the
subcontracting it
individual
out.
of having a criminal record? How
That's
does it
crazy.
impact their quality of life and their ability to contribute to society and the overall economy?
So there are all 45,000 collateral consequences to being incarcerated. These, and just having a criminal conviction generally, these collateral consequences can impact your ability to get housing or access public assistance. As was mentioned, it can impact your ability to get a professional license, which can hinder your future.
Yeah, if you've got a felony, man,
In fact, when
a lot of
people
companies will
are
not hire
incarcerated,
you.
their families immediately see a decline of income of 22%.
Even as
and
far
even
as
when
if
they
you try to
come
improve your
home,
education, a
income
lot of
is
programs
depressed
that
by
you would seek to go
15%
into
after
wouldn't even let you in the
incarceration.
program
What
because
that
you have a
does is
felony.
it hinders
Because
their ability
they don't
to
want to waste the
grow
time
economically
teaching you because you
up
won't
the
be able to
ladder,
be
and not
hired.
just for them, but also their families.
Is there a correlation between collateral consequences that hinder the reintegration into society of offenders and recidivism rates?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, there's no way to think about a world in which you're creating more crime, creating more collateral consequences, creating a situation and people have less economic opportunity, and expecting them to be able to exist in the society productively. Right? At the end of the day, people will do what they need to do to make ends meet, to eat, to find a place to turn, but sleeping on the street. And those become.
What needs to be done to improve reentry outcomes?
We need to invest in community support. The reality is that prisons were not meant for care, and that if we really want to address the social ills that lead to criminal behavior, we need to provide support and fund that support in community.
Thank you. And lastly, you said there were 32,000 consequences?
45,000.
How do you measure? Where do you get that statistic?
There's actually a database
the crazy thing is,
partially
Coop?
where BJA is actually involved, where
A
they
lot
have
of
measured
prisoners even
the
commit
number of
suicide,
collateral
and media doesn't even
consequences
focus on
across
that either.
states. So that's consequences at the federal level as well as consequences in every state for having a criminal
Because
conviction.
There are 45,000
usually it's
possible
because of
consequences to an individual.
threats
Yes,
or
to
death
having a criminal
threats from
conviction.
another inmate,
Thank you very
and
much.
a lot of them just off themselves because they don't want to be there
Expired.
anymore.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from
Yeah, I
South
mean, it's
Carolina.
more than that, man.
Thank you,
Prison
Mr.
is
Chairman.
a
Thank you
very
for having this
violent
hearing
place.
today. Mr. Tolman,
You
in
take
your
someone who's
testimony,
typically not
earlier, you
violent
mentioned
and
a
put
few
him in
reasons
prison.
why overcriminalization is a problem. You said that the average American
Especially
commits
depending on
3
the prison,
felonies
they're
a
going to
day
be
without
looking
even
at
knowing it. What are some of those
assaults,
examples?
sexual assaults,
Well,
robberies.
the crimes
that's
on the
all
books right
stuff
now, there
that
are many that
happens
are almost
in prisons.
laughable. A federal crime to write a check for under $1, for example. I personally had a case in which a father and son were cold and didn't think they would make it out of the wilderness, and they cut up a park bench and burned it to stay warm, and they were charged and put in jail. So it's examples like that we could go through. Those would be the low-hanging, easy fruit for Congress to get rid of many of those laws.
My understanding is one of them war strength.
Yes.
Like, what is that about?
Yeah, you know, the liquor business is very, very serious. You can't label it. When they were regulating it very, very tightly, then, you know, there were
name,
issues
but
with
there
how
was a
they
guy
would be
that actually
labeled
went
in
to
order
jail
to,
for a long
you know,
time
not falsely
for
advertise
criminal offenses,
the
but
contents.
his
And you
prison
developed
buddy
the
actually committed suicide in prison because
which required
some other
certain levels
prison
of
member was
alcohol.
actually threatening to kill him, and
those are still on
other
the books.
people around
So the
him.
good stuff was the pre-war.
He
That's
already
right.
had a bitch and jumped off the
Just to be clear.
second or third floor and hanged
You also
himself.
spoke that the
happens,
current
man.
DOJ is choosing to throw
Pretty
away the
fucked
rule
up,
of
though.
law when they attack political enemies. Can you talk about that a little bit and give me some examples of how that's happening?
It's even based on a movie.
It is a recent, I think, more recent development. There's always been at times pressures. When I was U.S. Attorney, I received a phone call from a member of Congress to investigate his political opponent. And I indicated that
again,
I
it's
would
just
not,
subcontracting
and
out
that
the
he
housing
had a claim that he should
for
submit to the
inmates.
FBI.
And then you got to think about it. The government,
But I think there are good, you know, well-meaning individuals that try to make those good decisions.
insurance.
But there's
all
no
the other
question
stuff
you
for
cannot
it.
simultaneously
So they just
proliferate
subcontract everything
laws and expand the power of the prosecutor, and at the same time expand immunity protection. You can't take away accountability and give them more power and not expect abuse to come as a result.
Okay,
Mr.
now
Tolman, I think it's
Jamesy boy.
interesting. You know, prosecutor
Yeah,
abuse.
based on true story,
happens.
Jamesy boy.
It's happened for years. I mean, you look at in the case of politics, you look at like Senator Ted Stevens as an example.
2013, 2014, it came out.
But to me, it seems to be much more in your face than it has ever been before. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And I think the prime example would probably be the prosecution of President Trump under federal law and, quite frankly, under state law too.
Well, you have a prosecution going on right now that individuals on both sides of the aisle have commented on the lack of evidence, the inapplicability of the law, the attempt to manipulate the facts in order to go after. Whether you like him or don't like President Trump, it should be concerning that a prosecutor would be able to manipulate their way into the courtroom against a political opponent.
Correct. And I'm going to switch gears on you again. You mentioned several examples, writing a check, the pre-war stuff, pre-war liquor. How can we, or even federal agencies, start to rein in this growth, quite frankly, in the administrative state? How can we do that?
I think there are plenty.
Don't allow fucking regulatory agencies to make up their own fucking rules.
Advocates, groups, even like Right on Crime, the organization I'm with, or many of the other organizations here, that would be willing to lend a hand to identify the criminal statutes and the criminal regulations that are outdated and could very easily be taken off the books. And that process should begin, and it should maintain. So you should continually be doing that as we move forward. Otherwise, we're just collecting and compiling and bloating our criminal code.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. I want to turn to you. The expansion of our federal criminal laws and encroaching on areas traditionally governed by the states, creating constitutional tensions, redundancies in statutes. You know, prior to Congress, I served in the General Assembly of South Carolina, and I want to make sure that federal laws don't really overcomplicate the efforts that are happening on the state and local level. Can you talk a little bit about how federal regulations are affecting state economies and local businesses?
Yes, thank you. It's a subtle effect in the work that I've done. Generally speaking, there's not a single regulation that will put a business out of business, but it's the death by
the Hughes Amendment would be a good one.
Or in this case, over 1 million cuts. So I've found that as federal regulation,
the entire NFA would be even better.
Investments in new ideas, and then
scrap every regulation that the ATF has ever written.
Because they can't put out new products, can't employ more people. There's all sorts of consequences all the way down the line.
And then take anybody
death by
that is
1,000
in
cuts,
prison
that broke the camel's back. These are the
because those regulations, because the NFA, and let their happy ass out.
Regulatory overreach.
Absolutely.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh God, here we go with another intellectual elite.
Center was founded and is funded by the Koch family foundation. Isn't that correct?
Is that for me, sir?
Well, Mr. Purcell, you're with the Mercatus Institute also, correct?
No, sir.
Just you, Mr. McLaughlin?
I am with the Mercatus Center, yes, sir.
And you are familiar with the fact that Mercatus Center was founded and funded by the Koch family foundation.
Oh my
It
fucking
was
God!
funded long before.
Jackass! Why are we even going there?
I was employed there. I'm not privy to the.
We're here to talk about the overregulation, overcriminalization of things, and you're going to the Koch brothers. You fucking mental midget.
I probably know less than you, sir.
Oh, gosh, you're really putting me on a pedestal there. I probably have superior knowledge. You're just modest, modest. But Mr. Tolman, your organization, Right on Crime, is also Koch brothers funded.
If I was ever in a hearing with this guy, I would have to ask him whether Guam tipped.
We have a number of funders. So one of
brothers is one of them.
One of them is also the Just Trust. And
he has actually funded you at the rate of about $5 million. Isn't that correct?
I don't have those numbers.
And then you come and you make the case against Alvin Bragg for prosecuting Donald Trump. And you also served as a pardon broker during the waning days of the Trump administration when pardons were being dispensed as if they had been paid for. Correct?
Who?
No, that's not correct.
Well, I already know.
It's not correct. I'm very proud. I was an attorney, and I represented individuals who were deserving of clemency. And I represented many, and wish that we would have been able to get many through. And clemency, those last days were not the way clemency should be run.
This
and
is not about
Anthony, what's up, my brother?
On pay to play, but I do want to commend the Koch brothers.
Mr. Johnson, man, this guy needs to just go away.
Hey, man, he is proof that we have an overabundance of NPCs in this country.
Down the line,
non-playable characters. They just
being more involved in the privatization of the prison industrial complex. We spend about $80 billion to incarcerate, $80 billion annually to incarcerate 2.2 million people. Ms. Tylek, can you give us, I'm wondering whether or not Koch brothers is interested in criminal justice reform because at some point they see dollar signs about privatization of the criminal justice system, just as they have supported the civil justice system privatization with forced arbitration. Can you comment on that for us, Ms. Tylek, please?
Sure. Well, I definitely don't want to ascribe intention to anyone I don't know. And so I can't say for certain what their long-term plans are. What I can say is that it's not uncommon for people in this space to get into and invest in this industry with other long-term plans. There was a mention earlier of the school to prison pipeline. We actually recently found that there are people interested in the prison to nursing home pipeline. And looking at ways to invest in correctional health care because they already own nursing homes on the outside. That said, I will give one nod and say that Americans for Prosperity, which is one of the Koch's sort of nonprofit organizations, does actually support the end to the prison telecom industry.
Mm-hmm. That industry, by the way, generates, gosh, I don't know how many, the backs of inmates, relatives who are seeking to communicate with their loved ones. How about how medical care and food for the inmates come into play in terms of privatization?
I think in our time, I want to really specifically address healthcare because healthcare in prisons and jails right now is under attack. It has been completely, in many cases, privatized. And one of the most egregious examples of sort of bankruptcy fraud and some things happening currently is Corizon's bankruptcy. So for those who aren't aware, Corizon—
Time has expired, but you may continue your answer.
I'll just say really quickly, Corizon is a major correctional health care company that was saddled with over $1 billion in lawsuits and settlements, and they separated the company into two. gave one half all the liabilities, the other half all of the assets, and then they bankrupted the liabilities and all the families who lost their loved ones.
Kind of like the Sackler family.
Gentlemen's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tolman, I have a friend who was an assistant attorney general in Alabama, and he actually told me you could go in a Publix grocery store and lock the door and charge every single citizen in there with some kind of crime if you were looking to do so. And so how does the overwhelming expansion of the federal criminal laws now affect ordinary citizens' ability to abide by the law?
When I was U.S. attorney, I used to tell people that give me a person or a company and give me just any time in their books or in their documents or in their affairs, and I could find a crime that we could apply. That's how confident I was as a prosecutor that the expansion was so robust. And it is no coincidence we have 1 in 3 Americans with a criminal history, whether arrest or conviction, and those two are connected, inextricably connected with the expansion of our criminal laws, and then the failure to rein in any prosecutorial abuse of it.
And I think Mr. Pirtle hit on a point in his opening testimony about we've got to have trust in the justice system within this country. That undermines our entire ability to be a nation, to be a nation of laws. And so I also, when I was doing our town halls in August of 21, the number one concern
prosecutors will go in and hide evidence,
was the weaponization
exculpatory
of
evidence on somebody,
them. And
prosecute them, throw them in prison.
Agents, I think 87,000 new IRS agents. Those are the kind of things to me that just send the wrong signal to what we need to be doing as a nation. So I was, Dr. McLaughlin, I want to talk a little bit about regulatory. And I was a small business owner, and it seemed like every day I was either I can remember one day specifically, I was dealing with the IRS, the DOT, the EPA, just trying to run a small business. And one of my favorite quotes is Ronald Reagan said, the government's idea on the economy is when it's moving, you tax it. If it keeps moving, you regulate it. And when it fails, you subsidize it. And so, Dr. McLaughlin, could you elaborate a little bit on the regulations and how that impacts small business and even our economy? I know you talked a little bit about it earlier, but that's part of the thing we've not really talked a lot about today. We talked a little bit about criminal, but certainly regulatory, the impact on the economy itself. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Thank you. My career has built up first a way of measuring how much regulation there is and how much crimes there are. Because we have this metrics, we can measure it. We can see what are the effects on small businesses, what the economy overall.
Remember,
so one
ATF
study that I published a few years ago was looking at small businesses in particular. They found that they get overwhelmed when there's a bunch of regulations created all at once.
And why the hell
the
no
thing
one
I
can
want to
ask
point out, this
these
is not
fuckers
surprising,
this?
right? All businesses must deal with these
Using
costs.
the
But
guy in
it's worse for
Arkansas's
small
case.
businesses than large businesses. Large businesses are able to absorb all those costs at once, whereas small businesses flounder.
Yeah, certainly. I think, like you said, the small business owner doesn't have all the attorneys. He doesn't have the team,
Coop. You know what you can do?
The case may be to try to work through that process. Mr. Pirtle, I remember I was when I was first elected to Congress. I was sworn in 21, and I was getting on an airplane.
This
all the time.
that info
Federal law
about that
requires
case
that you
with
wear a
the,
mask, and I didn't
ATF
remember
going
voting
body
on
cam
that.
footage.
So very often it seems like to me there's a lot of regulatory or a lot of things.
Something we definitely got to do a little bit more with. But even the Attorney General of Arkansas is trying to request all the information
and we can't keep up, obviously.
The ATF.
Right. And I think that's the real problem.
Jim Jordan and the House Judiciary Committee have a letter in the ATF's hands right now requesting all that information.
What about the
when
Arkansas
you've got
governor? Same
hundreds
thing.
of thousands of regulations.
Yeah, I think he's requesting a lot of information.
Carry a criminal penalty. And as Mr. Tolman,
so I mean, there's a lot of people requesting information from the ATF on this, but the ATF ain't giving it up.
So that you can literally, no matter what you do, you could
Just
be
like how the
prosecuted for a
CIA
crime
operates. They always
because
keep things hush hush and not say a
both
single
sides
word.
of the behavior,
Yeah.
so to speak. And I think with the regulatory, I think a lot of this is the, frankly, there's so much congressional authority has been delegated to the executive branch and independent agencies that I think it's a real challenge. And I think better guidance on what they can do with that authority when Congress delegates it would be good. And Congress pulling that authority back in more often would be very good as well.
How does the Faith and Family or Faith and Freedom Coalition view the moral aspects of criminalizing trivial and inadvertent actions? How do y'all view that?
Right. No, that's absolutely wrong. Criminal sanctions are one of the most powerful forms, one of the most incredible powers that we give to government. The fact that we can take life or liberty from someone, and trivializing that it harms the family, it harms our communities, it overburdens the taxpayers, and it's not necessary for public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes now the gentlelady of Pennsylvania, Ms. Neal.
Thank you, Chairman Biggs. Thank you, Ranking Member Jackson Lee, for convening this hearing, and I thank all of you for being here and sharing with us your expertise and your ideas. I wanted to focus on a particular area of criminalization or over-criminalization, and I'll relate it to an experience I had just recently in the last few weeks. I met with Secretary of Corrections for Pennsylvania. Her last name is Harry, from our Department of Corrections.
This woman,
She
Miss
shared
Dean.
that in the facilities she oversees,
Dean
a
is a
staggering
fucking
percentage of inmates struggle with addiction and mental health challenges. This is
Also,
not
she's
new to
very
many of you, I know that.
weak
Just by
minded
her
as a
round
woman.
estimates,
She
this
doesn't
is
want
not
to stand
perfect
for
data,
herself or others.
70% struggle with substance use or addiction, and anywhere between 15 to 35% mental illness, women and men. And so I raise that because it bears repeating. More than 1 in 3 people in our federal prisons have a history of mental illness, and probably 2 in 3 are struggling.
That's because you
with some kind of
jackasses
an addiction.
destroyed our mental health system.
It's an important issue for me and my family. We have had folks who have struggled with addiction and are blessedly in recovery. Not everybody gets that, and they are not incarcerated. Not everybody gets that. So, Ms. Tylik, I'd like to start with the facts that you used in your written testimony. Every 3 seconds, someone in the United States is arrested, most often for low-level infractions, including drug offenses. And those arrested are disproportionately Black, brown, and poor. Thanks for grounding us in that reality. We have to continually say that. It tells us there's something skewed about what's going on with our carceral system. What has your work taught you about the connection between addiction and incarceration? Specifically, what impact does incarceration have on somebody struggling with addiction?
Thank you. So addiction, drugs are actually the #1 arrested crime in the entire country. So of all those crimes that we're talking about, drugs is the center of everything. And that, is in part because of the failed war on drugs that we've seen over all these years, and the reality that there is no way to incarcerate our way out of drug addiction. Drug addiction does, in many cases, have the dual diagnosis of mental health, where people are trying to self-medicate. And so that you can't really separate drug addiction from the issue of mental health in many cases. And over the since the 1950s, 1960s, we have completely deinstitutionalized all support for mental health, right? And so as a result, we have 350,000 people who are incarcerated today with a serious mental illness, not just a history of mental illness. And so what we really need is we actually need a care approach to drug addiction. We need to be actually providing treatment, and there is nothing about prisons, the way they are built, the way they are designed, the way they are financed, the way they are structured, that is meant to help deal with drug addiction. Those things need to happen in our community, and we need to be investing.
Sometimes you can't always save a junkie, though.
Reduction and then further efforts to actually get people back to productivity.
I completely agree with you, and we have to change the narrative on
When
that.
it gets so high up on
Mr.
drugs, it's hard
Tallman,
to undo the damage done on
drawing
themselves.
on your experience as a prosecutor, I'm sure you did work with many cases where the defendant suffered from addiction. I was reading something in your testimony on page 2. More and more individuals on both sides of the political aisle
You have a lot better chance of getting someone off drugs, sending them to rehab, than you do sending them to prison.
That too often do not.
Now, again, if they commit a crime while they're on drugs, then they need to go to jail for the crime they committed.
Drug offenses as an example, the Department of
But
Justice,
especially knowing that it was kind of fueled by an addiction, you have to treat the addiction
to
side.
identify and take down kingpins.
The addiction is also created by psychological and emotional pain or something that happened in
an
life.
addict, a user, a small possession.
Yeah, most addicts don't just
What do you see, and maybe
go
from
from
your
healthy
own
people that don't
work
have
in the
anything
criminal
going
justice
on
system,
to addicts.
what's the chances of a defendant's
Usually
recovery
it's because
when he
they
or
want
she
something to be
often
attached to that actually gets
gets
some way of reality. That's why they
a
usually do it.
hammer for low-level drug offense?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's important,
And there's
critically
also a
important
bunch of
that people
people that don't believe
understand
in
that
hope.
we are doing a disservice by lengthening the sentences on
Yeah.
what is, in essence, low-level drug cases.
No,
When
you
I tell
definitely
that,
can't force it,
I,
BB.
I have a friend who is a prosecutor for
If
25 years. I
someone's not
asked
willing
him,
to
federal
change, if
prosecutor,
they're
how
not
many
willing
kingpins did you
to
get in
try
your
to
25
change,
years?
you can't
He said
force it.
one. And yet he was applying mandatory minimums to low-level distribution. Why? Because they can. And the philosophy is that if you have the case, you're going to reward your prosecutors if they're being aggressive and they're prosecuting a lot of people. That's how they get pats on the back. And so that's the danger of overcriminalization.
And the
Your time's
impact that
expired.
has on the family
Yes.
of the incarcerated person and the future of the incarcerated person. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes now the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Mr. Tolman, I'd like to go back to a concept that you raised earlier that I think is one of the really
Miss Lee, why
broad
does she sound
ideas
familiar?
we need to focus on here today, and that is
We've
that
probably
the
seen her in a
advent
ton of other
overcriminalization
She a
empowers
Republican?
rogue or politically motivated prosecutors to identify a person or target to
I
prosecute
think,
rather
as far as
than
which side of the
bringing
bench
criminal
she's on.
prosecutions based upon community needs, community safety, or
I'm
the
looking right now.
principles necessarily of fairness and equity. And you raised a particular example that I believe is instructive, and that is DA Alvin Bragg. I'd like to return to him for just a moment. Mr. Tolman, it is correct, is it not, that the case that Mr. Bragg brought
Yeah, she's
against
Republican.
President
She's
Trump
from
is
Florida.
actually predicated upon a set of misdemeanors for which the statute of limitation
Yeah, I
has
figured
run.
which side of the
Yes,
bench she
that
was
is
on,
correct.
but
And would you agree, Mr. Tolman,
can't
that in
remember a whole
fact
lot of her
that case
stances
is a
on some
good
stuff.
example of overcriminalization leading to selective or what appears to be entirely politically motivated prosecution?
When they have so many tools at their disposal and the ability to manipulate them, that is what overcriminalization ultimately leads to, is the use of the criminal code for something other than administration of fairness and justice.
Mr. Patil, I'd like to return to testimony that you gave in your opening statement that referred to criminal conduct that was not inherently blameworthy, rather the criminalization of conduct that wouldn't inherently be identified as wrong or blameworthy. And I'd like to discuss the concept of mens rea. How do you think we could use or integrate the concept of mens rea to ensure that that type of conduct to which you refer is not criminalized?
Well, thank you for the question. The concept of mens rea is critical. I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes who said, even a dog knows the difference between being tripped over and being kicked. That guilty mind element is a necessary component to take away life or liberty from someone. So I think one of the things that can be done is really taking a look where this shows up more often than not is in the regulatory realm, where either Congress has given vague or an ambiguous term to an agency and the ability to criminalize.
Yeah, BD, I can see
or
that.
An agency
man.
is stretching beyond a little bit, maybe a little beyond what Congress had intended it to be able to do. But I think that there was a bill a number of years ago that would have simply, if there was no mens rea in a federal statute or a federal regulation, it would insert a default mens rea requirement into the regulation or the statute. And I think that would be a huge step forward with Congress.
And Mr.
That would be a
McLaughlin, or
step
Dr.
forward.
McLaughlin,
How about we just
I'd like to go
scrap
back
the
to testimony
fucking?
you gave earlier as well.
Ugh.
You used as an analogy the
Let's
base
get rid of the
realignment
laws and the
closure
regulations.
commissions as a concept on how we might come at identifying all of these regulations and all of these things that we need to take account of and address as Congress. Would you go into some more detail there about your thoughts on how we might identify all of these regulatory agencies who have acted with such overreach and diminish the amount of these reported crimes that are out there?
Sure. The Bragg commissions was an example of, they put together a blue ribbon panel of experts to look at what can we get rid of, where we need to keep, what's essential. That's just one approach. I think another approach that I we've seen be very effective in finding someone to go back and identify regulations that could be cut because they aren't accomplishing their purpose, but they're creating harm, is regulatory budgeting. And this is where you put the agencies themselves on the task of finding old regulations that they've written and that they can get rid of. And you say, if you want to make a new regulation, great, go do your job. But if you're going to do that, get rid of something that's on the books and has been there for 30 years that you think isn't effective anymore.
And then you mentioned also that you particularly utilized data and research and analysis in your work in identifying where these problems might exist. Are there ways in which you think Congress could use the same types of tools to assist us in our work?
Sure. One easy example here is the dates when statutes and regulations were made. And
Sam, what's up, brother?
Updated, especially regulations.
This is a hearing about
overcriminalization. Code of Federal Regulations and find when each regulation was last updated. If something hasn't been updated in 20, 30, 40 years, maybe it's time to get rid of it, or at least look at whether it's time to get rid of it.
How about we look at it where there's no clear victim?
The lady yields back. Chair now recognizes the distinguished ranking member from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for her 5 minutes.
Somebody has to show to be harmed from it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You must have some uncanny sense of rightness or timeliness to hold this hearing on a day, as I indicated, every part of America seems to be focused on student protests, which we haven't had in a while. I can recall
student protests. You're supporting a country that hates our ass.
When it was extremely, how should I say it, exercised, if you will. It was extremely active and engaged. When students had any myriad of activity to be engaged in the war, of course, the Vietnam War was certainly one of great height.
Yeah, because there weren't any student protests in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. Huh?
Issue of
seriously
discrimination against minority students, in particular, in this instance, African American students. There was a long litany of
American African descent,
that individuals had. I am particularly grateful. I don't know, Mr. Tolman, whether or not.
Yeah, that's another good point, Vivi. Yeah, the government can't be the victim. It's amazing to me that the government can be considered.
I hope not. I hope that we will not, design more.
You know what we've actually done so bad, actually, in this country, Coop, back in the time of the Old West?
Charged with. This is a perfect, how should I say it?
Discriminated and also almost slaughtered the entire Native American populace.
I can't imagine what else, and hope there is no other litany of things that these students might be engaged in. They have the right for their expression.
It's kind of what happens every single time where the government's allowed to disarm.
Indicate that I support the freedom of speech, the freedom of the right to associate. The First Amendment is a wide, vast amendment that many people have misused. So in any event, the chairman has certainly picked a very timely moment for these cases. And I hope that we
oh God, that chick sitting off the Sheila Jackson side over there is another one that's just
which I think is going to be most important. Let me quickly then try to ask questions quickly and go to you, Ms. Tyler, and hope for quick answers because you graduated from Harvard, one of nation's renowned universities that are grappling quietly, I guess, with their engagement. You led the nation's first successful campaign to make jail phone calls free. I remember that case. I was here in the Judiciary Committee. It was an unbelievable expression of free speech. But you are right. Women carry the
a lot of these colleges are become absolute shitholes now.
This whole idea of
yeah, man, they've been that way since the
in many different ways. Travel,
no, but I mean,
fares,
it's progressed to the extent where it's unbelievable.
And so I have a very quick question.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it before. We had
phone calls
even back in the 40s,
ways
had people that
do
pretty radical,
make money, and if you could just do that very
taught a whole group of radicals. Those radicals became teachers and taught more radicals, and then it just got progressively worse.
Just give me a brief scenario because
That's why a lot of people aren't going to college
Series of other
anymore.
questions for other witnesses.
Very
Well,
quickly,
the
at the
fact
time in
that
New York,
they
it
get
was
in so
50
much
cents
debt,
for
they
the
don't even
first
want to
minute and
fucking
5
attempt
cents
it.
every minute after that. But throughout the country, those calls can still run 25, 50, even 75 cents a minute. And that labor is not just physical, or that cost is not just
And
physical,
you
but
could
it
run
is
up
the
to,
emotional labor.
yeah, you could run up to how much? Almost.
Today, they still can run up to about 75 cents a minute in 2024.
And
for a phone call.
would cost a hardworking, maybe hourly compensated person how much? What would they wind up? They're taking care of the children, they're taking care of the grandchildren.
We're talking about a few $100s a month. And for people who are incarcerated that are either making nothing or 9 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents an hour, it can be hours worth of labor before they can
Gabriel,
get a
what's
simple
up, brother?
15-minute call.
So what has been a hourly charge, not hourly, but what has been a meager offense may wind up bankrolling, not bankrolling you, may wind up breaking your account literally.
Absolutely. 1 in 3 families are going into debt over the cost of a simple phone call in 2024.
Which leads to, why am I being slapped more than once on the incarceration for a very low-level crime, if you will, if you
And
can
why
say
is my
that.
family being slapped in that case?
For sure. Let me go to Mr. Tolman. There are many
Probably should have
overlapping
thought about that before
statutes in the
putting a
Federal
law or
Criminal
policy
Code.
in it
For
enforced
example, there are
and
more
put it in the
than
books.
24 different false statement statutes, Chapter 47, Title 18, which is a famous title. There are also a number of fraud statutes and obstruction statutes. So how could we reduce these of the statutes that overlap? And I do want to just make a point, if you can answer that, but I also want to say that my comments are not pointed to Mr. Bragg
Just
because
listening to
it is
her
in
just
the
give me a
judicial
headache right now
system,
to coop.
and I'm going to allow the judicial system to work its
Oh
way.
man, yeah,
And I
that's
would like
that's the
Mr.
reason
Tolman
I
to be able
said
to
my
answer those
streams ought to be
questions, please.
sponsored by
Of course,
freaking
the gentle lady's time has
Advil,
expired, but Mr.
Tylenol,
Tolman, you may answer the
Motrin.
question.
Thank you. There's no question that if we need to take current federal
By now,
statutes right
we all
now,
having a Lager beer right
and we
now.
need to see the overlap. There are ways you can do that through, programs that you can run, but we absolutely, as, Congress should, and groups, advocacy groups should be looking very closely at the overlaps of these statutes, because many of them can result in adding additional charges when you otherwise wouldn't, because as a prosecutor, you wanted to make sure you had all of the potential crimes at issue. And so then you get bloated indictments that have multiple counts in them, when really they should be charged with what the heart of, or the essence of the crime is.
Well, thank you very much. We want to do good in public service, not do bad and do ill.
Lady, you're the one pushing even more laws and regulations.
That,
You
I wish I had
hag.
more time, but thank the witnesses, and I yield to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentle lady.
Hell,
yields
she even
back, so I
supported
recognize myself for
policies
my
and laws that were like under Jim Crow.
So the first thing
Yeah.
I want to just say is,
Who's the bigot right there?
I appreciate
One
the
of her
testimony.
safe, one of her safe storage
When I
bills
first got in, I
costed
thought
someone
to Congress,
$500 a gun
we really need to
that wasn't
do this,
secured
because
properly and had criminal
in my law
charges.
practice, people said, "Why'd you go into politics?" I said, "Because most of my clients had been abused by just the regulations." So let's see here. I'm going to ask all of you this question before, and I want you to think about it, because I appreciate all of you have produced in your documents and in your testimony today some reform movement that you think we should do. I want each one of you to give us the lowest hanging fruit, because that's always the easiest for Congress to do. As I
The
like to
NFA,
say,
scrap
I'm
it.
willing to do
The Gun
the
Control
least I
Act.
can do.
Scrap
I'm
it.
always happy
Yeah.
to do the least I can do.
The
So
Heller
that's
Act
kind of the Congress's
decision.
attitude on this.
Not the
So
Heller
we
decision.
want to
What's
do
the,
that, so I'm
one
going to
that
ask
was
each of you
the
to
Brady?
do that. But in
Well, Brady
in
Bill's in the
speaking to
86 crime
Yeah, Brady. Get
bill.
rid of the Brady.
I also want us to focus on really what Congress can do, because we have actually been derelict in our duty.
And
in my
also
opinion.
put a
And that's
law
the
in motion
problem.
and
Take
bill
every-
to go after our
Active.
border.
And I know that, and you don't say the
Take
mens rea thing,
every
because we all
single
agree on the mens rea thing.
standing
Okay, so
regulation
I need
that has
something else
criminal
besides the mens
penalties
rea issue. Okay,
and scrap it.
so Ms. Tyler,
Let's
you
start
had
there. That would
I
be
think
easy.
about 20
Federal
different
Register, burn it to the ground.
reforms that you put in yours. So if you can just give me your top one, your number one, that'd be good.
I don't know if it's the lowest hanging fruit, but I do think ending the exception in the 13th Amendment is a critical step for our country. And in the 250th year anniversary that's coming, I would say.
Now, this is federal, Sam.
Okay,
The
you're right.
13th
That may not be
Amendment,
the
get rid of
lowest
the
hanging
13th
fruit.
Amendment.
Okay, make phone calls free in federal prisons permanently. You already
Okay.
did it in the CARES Act. We can just make it permanent policy.
Okay, that may be the lowest hanging fruit, but I'll take a look at your other proposal there. Thank you, Ms.
What's the
Tyler.
13th Amendment again? Let me
Mr.
look it
Tolman.
up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would very strongly urge, you've obviously talked about mens rea, everybody understands that passage alone would be the largest Band-Aid to
Get rid
until
of
you
the
could
Slavery Act?
deregulate.
Oh my God.
And so I would then say deregulation
abolish slavery as
if
institution
you
in the United States
if you do
territory?
have, President Trump put in place, if you're going to
crazy?
pass regulation, you've got to get rid of two. And whatever you think about it, that was really good governance. And the Congress forcing the agencies to do that would probably be the most important thing they could do immediately.
Thank you, Mr. McCloughan. Dr. McCloughan.
I agree with Mr. Tolman. The changing the incentives of regulatory agencies to review their own regulations, the old ones, to identify duplication or contradiction. You could accomplish that through a regulatory budget, such as the 1 in, 2 out, or other means as well. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. Make agencies review their own rules and get rid of ones that aren't effective.
Thank you, Doctor.
But then they get to choose which ones they say are effective, and they ain't getting rid of shit.
I think there are a couple of bills before Congress right
sadly.
now that might really be interesting, that do things to ameliorate for folks who are already incarcerated or reentering back into society some of the burdens that we've talked about here today. The first would be the Federal Prison Oversight Act, which came out of the Oversight Committee. I think maybe unanimously, but overwhelmingly for sure, bipartisan support. I think there's also a bill called the Safer Supervision Act, which would help before this committee, which would help incentivize moving folks who are compliant, who've served their term and are compliant with their terms of their release into society more quickly, so we can.
What is
focus
this?
on
The
more
term
dangerous
malum prohibitum. It's just the government
and the other
telling
would
you
be,
can't have
the Clean
something.
Slate Act, which we
How about we just get rid of every law that's built off that?
Consequences that we have, that for lower level offenders who have committed
In other words, there's no victim.
We would seal their record after they commit their after they
get rid of it, scrap it,
complete their sentence and complete their supervision without committing new crimes. You'd seal their record so that it'd be easier for them to get housed, to get licensure, to get a job and things like that, and reenter back into community. Once again, removing them out of the criminal justice system so that we can refocus our criminal justice system on the most dangerous. And really, I'd love to see something done with clearance rates, which are really quite low.
Thank you. And I'll just say that a couple of things that I've thought of, and I appreciate your suggestion that some of these things need to move to civil penalties. And I couldn't help but think of the ranking member's discussion of the explosion in Texas City. Is that where it was? In Texas City. There was no reason, quite frankly, in my mind, for the feds to get involved. You could have prosecuted the execs who had overt violations of safety regs for manslaughter, at least, and you could also have facilitated civil rewards, which is actually really what you needed when people are maimed or killed, is in my opinion. So that's one thing. The other one is maybe, and I'm really reticent to believe that bureaucratic institutions are going to give up their power base. I really don't think that's where they want to go. So maybe Congress needs to, every time, take a real good look at the rule-making process, because that's how these things occur. Number two is maybe Congress, like we do with constitutionality, you have to put something on a bill that's constitutional. You have to go in and say, maybe whether you intend or don't intend for there to be some kind of criminal punishment involved with it as well. Just another thing for Congress to do. Anyway, I appreciate all the testimony. A lot to come out of this. I think this is, I think it's actually a very complex issue that has some simple
see, Matt, it's abused, but it's also
before you.
We've heard it a lot of times in criminal law.
Thank you. With that,
that
we are
ignorance of the law is no excuse.
They call fucking bullshit on that, man. I mean,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
No, Coop, in my eyes, they should actually amend that. Ignorance of the law or not knowing the law should be understandable and should be expunged and removed.
It's the case.
If you don't know a law
we
that's
have
in the
so
system, it's not your fault.
Yeah, We have so many laws right now that no one can keep up with them. No one can actually quantify them. So, but I mean, everybody understands that you can't murder people, you can't rape people, you can't rob people, you can't extort people, you can't blackmail people. People understand crimes like that. Inherently, they understand them. So those laws make sense. Again, because we focus on guns so much, gun laws make no fucking sense. It makes no fucking sense why me adding a vertical grip to the wrong gun puts me in prison for 10 years. It makes no criminal sense that if I have a firearm that malfunctions and releases more than one round with a single function of the trigger, that, oh my God, that's a criminal offense. It makes no fucking sense that, this stuff is based off of tax law. But if you don't pay your blackmail fee to the government, it's a criminal offense. It's fucking ridiculous. And allowing agencies, whether it's EPA, ATF, the fucking IRS, allowing them to write their own regulations because Congress writes shitty laws is insane. They just look at things and they're like, okay, well, someone did this and we didn't have, the law really doesn't cover this, but we really don't like this. So we're going to write a new regulation that says that if you don't pay this tax, that's illegal. Or if you do this, it's illegal.
And I mean, Coop, even before this, like I said, look at Canada. They got stricter laws than us, and yet crime has not been resolved.
Well, that's because all the shit that they've done doesn't really focus on criminals, people who want to harm others. It focuses on and it basically restricts the freedoms of people who don't want to hurt others, people who aren't out there to hurt others.
You want to pop up that email with the stuff I sent you with all the information?
Yeah, I got just a minute, and then I'm going to have to bounce.
Yeah, that's fine. I got to take care of some things anyways. But yeah, we live in a weird time, my friend. Crazy ass time.
It's
I mean,
it's another thing that just keeps getting progressively worse.
Even looking back, just a criminal offense of possession of marijuana is enough to get you go to prison, man. Back in the 90s and 80s.
It's enough to get you in prison now still. And it's definitely enough. Yeah, it's definitely enough in a lot of cases where, I shared the wrong thing. It's definitely enough in a lot of cases where, say, you got locked up over something. Yeah, you did a crime. You got locked up over it. Then you get out. You pop positive for marijuana or an opiate or something like that. Then they just violate you and put you back in jail. Just because you did something that the government doesn't like. Not that you committed an actual crime where there was a victim. Now, if you commit another crime, even on drugs or whatever, and there's a victim, you rob somebody, rape somebody, murder somebody, your ass deserves to go back to prison. I've been in prison. There are people there that absolutely deserve to be there. There are also a lot of people that don't deserve to be there.
Yep. So yeah, since a decade ago, this guy's been doing the same shit and hasn't been resolved or dealt with ever since. He changed his last name.
In a report, said one of the men charged in the federal shooting of a Hamilton retailer, Giorgio Barsetti, has admitted to helping the criminal organization that carried out the killing. Jamal Chimlin, whatever, however you want to fucking pronounce it, admitted in a courtroom that he was motivated to help a criminal organization for money. Yeah, no shit, that's a big motivator. He did not know who was working for or about the alleged murder plot. He was not there March 2nd, 2020, when the father of 3 was gunned down outside of. So, okay. Previously, under the investigation, police searched Chimlin's Scarborough business on November 18th, 2021, found 11 guns inside a floor safe, including 2 that were loaded, more than 100 rounds of ammunition. Oh, he had an arsenal. A mask describing being extremely lifelike. Tracing devices, two-way radios, radars, cameras. But allegedly changed it to Kimley in 2020 to avoid firearms prohibition order. He has an extensive record with his last conviction in 2013, also for participating in criminal organization.
I got the 2 articles there also talking about it. And there's the 2 guns there as well.
Yeah, it's just more freaking ridiculous, man. Anyway, I do have to get out of here, guys. I got to get out of here and head to work.
Yep.
I got a bunch of shit I got to try to take care of the shop this afternoon. And then we'll see Warsaw if we can tonight. We'll run that other stream.
Definitely. We talking detox and paranormal. How you like that?
Yeah. If we can run it tonight, we'll run it.
That sounds good, man.
This is just because, man, just to focus on something other than just retarded ass laws.
Yeah, I need a break too, man.
Yeah.
I need a break as well.
It's like I said, and I've told it on stream before. That, I look at this stuff, I research it, and then eventually at night, man, I just hit a point where I'm done with it. I got to get my brain on something else because this stuff is just so retarded.
Yeah, I tell you what, if we're gonna do it, I'm gonna have a beer too, man. So wherever you got, you take one and I'll take one as well, man.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
Breather.
Like I said, it's not 100%. It kind of depends on what I got going on by the time I get to the house and everything tonight. But if we can run it, we'll run it.
Yep, sounds good.
And if not, we'll set it up for another night.
I mean, I'm free tomorrow. We could do the same thing. If you can't, that's fine.
Yeah, I just got to play it by ear right now because my schedule is just so freaking screwy. That's the reason I just go live whenever I can right now.
Yeah. No, I understand, man. So to understand, I also respect you're tight on your schedule.
Hey, brother, man, it's same old same. But anyway, Warsaw, have a good day, brother, man. We'll talk to you after a while. Everybody else in chat, Damon, everybody, man, love you guys. You guys are all cool as shit. And we'll end it like we always do. You perks be cool. Keep that thing on you at all times. Realize your government hates you and wants you dead or in prison. And they really, really don't mind shooting you in the face. So anyway, y'all guys be cool. Have a great rest of the day, guys.